Burglary in Belize, a read wine bookstore, cozy mystery. Book 8, written and narrated by Lena Turner. Chapter 1. I can't believe I'm going to Belize and you two aren't going with me, I said to my best friends, Cora and Sally. You aren't even going to miss us. You're going to have so much fun, Sally said. Without you two, it just won't be the same. You just need to go, have fun, and be prepared to tell us all about it when you return, Cora added. Cora, Sally, and I opened a combination bookstore, coffee shop, and wine shop a while back. It was scary opening a business, but we were having the time of our lives. I wished I would have done it sooner. But what if Cody needs me? I've never left him for so long. Your ex-husband might be a deadbeat in the finances department, but you can't say that he isn't a good dad, Sally reasoned. She was right. Jared had never quite gotten himself together when it came to a steady job, much less a career. But he loved our son Cody, and honestly, it was probably going to be good for them to spend this quality time together for an extended period. It was the beginning of baseball season, a sport they both loved, and I knew Cody was looking forward to practicing his pitching with his dad. I second what Sally said. When is the last time you've been on vacation? Cora asked. I'm not even sure I can answer that. I might have still been living with my parents. Then see, you deserve this, Sally said as we all arrived at the security line, which was as far as they could go with me. You're going to have an amazing time and come back rested and refreshed. We all hugged and I waved as I got into the security line in the throes of people who, like me, wanted to get away from the cold of the Midwest. After I got through security, I stopped at one of the airport stores for a bottle of water and some snacks, and then went to wait at my gate. As much as I hated to go on this trip by myself, it wasn't because it bothered me to travel alone, but Cora, Sally, and I had all won this trip based on a contest we entered. However, they both had scheduling conflicts they couldn't change, and the contest rules were firm. It was either this week or no week. Cora and Sally said there was no way I should give up an all-expenses-paid trip to Belize, and while I felt guilty, I was glad not to miss out. After several hours on a commercial flight, then a really small prop plane that made me pause for a second when they asked everyone to wait before getting on and not to move because they needed to balance the plane out in a 20-minute car ride, I was walking into the resort. The pictures online didn't do it justice. The foyer was all open, with palm trees decorated with lights and growing out of the floor. As I walked up to the reception desk, I felt instant happiness from the turquoise and peach decor. It was the little things. Can I help you? Cheryl, the smiling woman behind the desk, asked. I'm checking in, Trixie Pristine. Ah, yes. We've been expecting you. You are in one of our premier suites, which comes with a butler, a fully stocked mini fridge, and everything at the resort included in your package. Oh, wow. I don't think I've ever had a butler. I'm not sure I need one. You may not think so, but I'm sure you will find that Javier can be very helpful. Cheryl called out to her right and lifted her hand, motioning over a young man who was probably in his late 20s, dark-skinned and had black hair that was a little bit on the longish side and tucked behind his ears. Javier, this is Trixie Pristine. She is your VIP guest for the week. Can you please take her luggage and show her to her room? Of course. He held his hand out to shake mine. It's a pleasure to meet you. Is this all you brought? He said, pointing to my suitcase. Yes. Is that a surprise? Honestly, yes. You should see the number of bags some of our VIP guests bring. Javier, Cheryl admonished, but I had to suppress a smile. I found his honesty refreshing. You will find, Javier, that I am very low maintenance. Now lead the way to my room. I would love to get freshened up. Javier and I chatted on the way to my room, which was on the top floor. I was speechless when he opened the door to let me in and then set my bag on the suitcase stand. Is there anything else I can get you right now, Ms. Pristine? No, and please call me Trixie. He gave a quick nod. Trixie it is. If you need anything, you can go to the phone and press number 9896, and that rings directly to my phone, he said, pointing to a phone on his belt. I'm sure I won't need to bother you. Please, bother me. I'm assigned to you for your entire stay 24/7. If you don't bother me, I will be very, very bored. Well, in that case, I'll try to think of something for you to do. Appreciated. If you don't mind me asking, what did you plan to do for dinner? I honestly hadn't thought that far ahead. I saw on the website that there are several restaurants here at the resort. There are. Pretty much something for any mood that you are in, and some are better than others. I'm sure you want to relax and unwind and probably not feel like getting all gussied up for dinner, so I would recommend the Bay Lounge. It's a more casual place. Think a few steps up from an afternoon deli, but more importantly, it's outside facing the water. It's so relaxing to sit out there as the sun is going down and listen to the waves. It sounds amazing. Do I need reservations? Because it is the busy season and we're getting close to full capacity, I would recommend you have reservations. Tell me what time you want to eat, and I will have that handled for you. Okay, maybe having a butler would be nice. How about 7? Consider it done. Before I leave, can I pour you a glass of wine or some champagne out of the mini fridge? I wasn't one to day drink, even though it was almost 5 o'clock, and while champagne would be a nice treat, it would just put me to sleep. I'll pass on the alcohol or I'd be in bed before dinner. How about a soda? A little caffeine to pep you up, he said, and listed out the choices. I wouldn't turn down a Diet Coke. I walked around this magnificent room that you couldn't even call a room. It was much more than that, a suite the size of an apartment. The living area was bigger than my living room at home. I walked over and peeked in the bedroom, which was twice the size of mine. I set your drink on the table. Don't hesitate to ring me if you need anything else, and enjoy your dinner. Thank you, Javier. He left, closing the door quietly behind him, and I walked over to grab my drink before walking out to the balcony. There was beach or ocean as far as I could see. The salt-scented breeze assaulted my nostrils, and I inhaled deeply, already feeling myself relax. A couple of hours later, I made my way downstairs and found the Bay Lounge. I was glad I decided to have the caffeine because it definitely perked me up. Who knew sitting on a plane and doing absolutely nothing all day would be so exhausting? I walked up to the hostess stand behind another woman, probably a few years older than me in her 40s, who was talking to the hostess. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see a reservation here, and we're full," the hostess said to her. "Are you sure?" I don't think I'm hallucinating the fact that I made a reservation at the lounge for 7 tonight, April 15th. "I think I see what happened," the hostess said. "Today is the 14th, so your reservation is for tomorrow." The hostess scrolled down the iPad she was holding. "Yep, I see it. Tomorrow at 7. "Well, that explains it. I never was one for keeping dates straight," she laughed. "And you really don't have anything for tonight? I was looking forward to your lobster bisque special." "No, I'm sorry. Not your fault, sweetheart. Thanks for not making fun of me for not knowing the date." The woman turned and smiled at me. "I'm dining alone. Would you like to join me?" I blurted out before thinking, but why not? She seemed nice. "Are you sure it wouldn't be a huge imposition?" "Not at all. Is that okay?" I asked the hostess. "Of course. Let me take you to your table." While inviting a complete stranger to have dinner with me was not my norm, we chatted like we had always known each other. Bessie Vincent was here a day early for a vacation with her sister. Bessie was a real estate agent from Fresno, California, divorced, no children, and said her sister was recently widowed, which was why she was treating her sister to this vacation. "Are you sure you don't want to have another cup of coffee with me?" I asked her once we had finished dinner and dessert, and she got up to leave. "I would love to, but I'm exhausted. I want to get a good night's rest because if I know my sister, she's going to want to hit the ground running the minute she gets here. She is like the Energizer Bunny, and I'm more like a sloth. I like my rest." I highly doubt that, but I completely get wanting to rest up. "Are we still on for coffee in the morning?" "Definitely. I'll see if we need a reservation and take care of it if we do. See you at 8. "Sounds good. See you in the morning." I finished my coffee and signed the check, billing it to my room. It felt weird not actually having to pay or worry that there weren't any dollar amounts on the bill. I went back to my room, and even though it felt weird, I called Javier. "How can I help, Ms. Pristine?" "I mean Trixie," he said, answering on the first ring. "Can you make a reservation for 2 at the Beach Cafe for 8 a.m.? "Absolutely. Anything else?" "No, that will be it. Thanks, Javier." We hung up, and I grabbed my pajamas out of the suitcase. I should put everything up, but I was tired. I would rather deal with it myself tomorrow than have Javier handle my underthings. After washing my face and changing into my pajamas, I crawled under the covers and immediately drifted off to sleep, with thoughts of how relaxing this vacation already was. Chapter 2. "Can I get you anything else?" the waitress at the beach cafe asked me the next morning. "No, I think I'm good." Coming down to the beach cafe and listening to the waves, people watching, and just enjoying the view had been amazing. I had to laugh that 24 hours ago I was telling Cora and Sally that I felt bad about going, and now I was beginning to think I might never want to go home. Growing up in the Midwest, I hadn't traveled much outside the area. My parents had taken the family on a couple of beach vacations, once to Destin, Florida, and once to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. But I hadn't really traveled as an adult. I realized I had missed out on a lot. There was a big world out there, and the only thing I would have changed about being here was that I wished I could have my friends and my son to share the experience. What about a mocha latte to go? You could take a stroll. There's that little stone path over to the right leading out to the beach. On mornings I don't work. That's my favorite thing to do. Walk the beach with my coffee. You know what? I think that sounds like an amazing idea, but can you make it decaf? Not a problem. I'll have that coming right up. She cleared the plates from my omelet and fruit and headed off to get my latte. The morning had honestly been perfect, except Bessie never showed up, and I found myself a little disappointed. We had a good time at dinner, and I had looked forward to getting to know her better. In any case, it wasn't like she owed me anything. She probably slept in or left to get her sister early. There were any number of reasons she didn't show up. Here you go, 1 mocha decaf latte. Enjoy your walk, the waitress said. Even though all my expenses were covered, I left a generous tip. I should probably ask Javier if that was okay, but I couldn't imagine it wasn't. So far, everyone I had met in this establishment had gone out of their way to make sure I had a good time. I headed down the stone path that led to the beach. There were a few people out walking, but it was still early enough that it wasn't busy, which made my walk even nicer. I took off my sandals when I got in the sand, holding them in one hand with my latte in the other, and I had a grin from ear to ear. This was the life. I figured I would walk 10 or 15 minutes and then turn around and head back. Javier had slipped an activity sheet under my door this morning, and there were actually a few things that sounded fun. It was a good thing I was going to be here for 10 days because I wanted to take advantage of everything. Walking in sand was a lot more difficult than the walking I did at home around the town park. I was definitely going to feel this in my thighs later. I was just about to turn around when I noticed someone lying in the sand with a blanket covering them, except for one foot that was sticking out. That seemed odd. It was already quite warm out. I couldn't imagine how hot it was under that blanket. There was a piece of paper lying on the sand and I picked it up, putting it in my pocket to throw away later, mentally admonishing people who would litter this beautiful beach. Something about the foot looked familiar to me, and I stopped. The nail polish on the toes caught my eye, and my heart started to race. No way it couldn't be. I looked around, and with the exception of a family a couple of 100 yards down the beach who were not within shouting distance, no one was around. I took a few steps closer to get a better look at the pedicure, and that's when I noticed the person's foot was gray. I dropped my latte, feeling my omelet revolt in my stomach. I recognized the pedicure because it was the same one Bessie had. We had talked last night about many things, and one was how excited I was to wear sandals when it was still far from sandal season back home. She had then stuck out her foot and teasingly bragged that she could always wear sandals in California, and one of her guilty pleasures was to get nail art with her pedicures. Her toes were painted a gold metallic with a pink crown on the big toe because she said she was the queen. I was now looking at that same pedicure, and I couldn't imagine 2 people in Belize having the same one. Bessie, wake up. Can you hear me? It's time to get up, I called out loudly. Nothing, not even a stir. I took a couple of steps closer, calling out again, and then grabbed the corner of the blanket and lifted it up. Staring at me with lifeless eyes was Bessie, and she wasn't sleeping. You said she was supposed to meet you this morning? A Belizean officer asked me. After finding Bessie, I had immediately run back to the resort to get help. At first, security for the resort had me take them back to her. I wasn't sure they believed me that she was dead. I almost didn't believe it myself, but once we got back to the body, they jumped into action. We had taken a golf cart back out on the beach to get to Bessie, and that's where I was sitting when the police arrived and came over to talk to me. Yes, I nodded tearfully, but she never showed, and I just assumed she slept in or had to leave early to meet her sister who was coming in today. Did you 2 arrive here together? No, I didn't meet her until last night. I explained to the officer how we met, had dinner together, and then made plans for the morning. Did she seem upset or despondent about anything? He asked. Do you think she committed suicide? I don't think anything, ma'am. Can you answer the question? How do you think she was feeling? I think she was feeling the same way as me, excited to be in this paradise. I know she was thrilled for her sister to arrive and for them to enjoy a vacation together. Did she mention anyone besides her sister, husband, boyfriend? We really only spent an hour or so together over dinner. She mentioned she was divorced with no kids, but didn't say much else. We really just talked about work and being here in Belize. She's a real estate agent in Fresno, California, I added. How long are you going to be here in the country? I'm here for 10 days. Well, 9 now. Thank you. I think I have everything we need right now. If I need anything else, I will contact you at the resort. Thank you, I said to his back as he walked away, and I watched as they zipped Bessie into a bag, loaded her onto a gurney, then slid her into the ambulance. Are you okay? A voice came from my right. I looked, and it was Javier with a concerned look on his face. Yes. No. I don't know. What are you doing here? Cheryl told me you came to the front desk distraught and said someone was hurt and then headed back out. As soon as I found out, I came out here to see if you needed anything. I couldn't help but think this was definitely personal attention, though his concern looked genuine, not just because he was paid to be concerned. Can you see if I can leave? I'd really like to go back to the resort. Of course. Wait right here. Javier walked over to the police officer I had spoken to, who was talking to another officer. A few minutes later, he walked back. You're free to go back to the resort. I can take you. I brought a golf cart down. Thank goodness. Between finding Bessie and running all the way back to the resort, I'm exhausted. I can imagine. Let's just get you back. We didn't talk on the way back, which I was thankful for. The last thing I wanted to do was make any kind of small talk. I didn't have the emotional energy for that. I was still trying to process what had just happened. How could someone who had been so vibrant and full of life a few hours ago be dead on the beach? I wasn't sure how she died, and I didn't know her well, but I felt there was no way she would have killed herself, though I understood the police had to cover all of their bases. We got to the resort and walked in, and I heard a woman shrieking. I looked over at the front desk, where a woman and another police officer were standing next to Cheryl. She looked like the carbon copy of Bessie, so my guess was this was Bessie's sister and she had just been given the bad news. I felt like I should go say something and headed in that direction, with Javier following me. The woman looked up when I approached. Are you Belinda? I asked. The woman nodded. I'm Trixie Pristine. I met your sister last night, and I just want to tell you I'm sorry for your loss. She was a wonderful woman, even though I didn't know her well. The woman let out a sob, and then dabbed at her eyes with her tissue. Thank you. I just don't know what I'm going to do now. They said I have to go identify the body. Would you go with me? The question took me back at first. I wondered why she would want that. She didn't even know me. Then I realized she was here alone in a foreign country and wouldn't have anyone else to go with her. Of course, whatever you need. Little did I know those words would come back to bite me. Chapter 3. Belinda needed a few minutes to compose herself before heading into town to identify Bessie's body. I told her to call me when she was ready. My earlier idea of planning to do something fun went out the window, but I wouldn't have been able to have fun anyway, not after what had just happened. Cheryl had someone take Belinda to her room, and I headed to mine with Javier in tow. Are you sure you're okay? Javier said when we got on the elevator. I'm more okay than Belinda, but not really. I didn't know Bessie that well, but she was so nice and seemed so happy to be here. I can't imagine she did something to herself. Is that what the police said? They asked questions about it, but my guess is it's just them doing their job, I said. The elevator doors opened, and we walked down to my room. I went to pull the key card out of the little bag I was carrying, and Javier beat me to it, opening the door and then holding it open for me. We walked in, and I sat down on the couch in the living area. Can I get you anything? He asked. I'm fine for now. Then I will leave you alone. Call me when Belinda is ready to leave. I will drive you to the police station. I hadn't even thought about that. How to get there, that is. Thanks, Javier. He nodded and left, and I swiveled around so I could lie down on the couch. I wasn't tired, but man, what a morning. The image of Bessie's lifeless body kept replaying in my mind. I sensed the image would haunt me for a long time. I must have fallen asleep because the ringing of the phone jolted me awake in my room. It took me a second to get my bearings and realize what the noise was. I jumped up and ran over to the side table to answer. Hello? Trixie? It's Belinda. I lost the slip of paper your number was on, so I called your room. I hope that's okay. Of course it's okay. How are you doing? I asked. It doesn't seem real. I talked to her this morning. She left me a message when I was on the plane, telling me how she couldn't wait for me to get here. I can't imagine what happened between then and now, she trailed off. I'm so sorry, Belinda. I can't even imagine what you're going through. Is there anything I can do to help? My heart went out to her. I couldn't imagine her grief. I didn't have a sister, but that wasn't necessary to know how horrible the situation was. I'm hoping that you're still willing to go to the morgue with me. I just can't do this alone. Of course I'm willing to go with you. Like I said, anything you need. I have a driver lined up so we can leave whenever you are ready. That's so thoughtful. I came back to my room and laid down for a bit, and I'd like to take a quick shower. I feel dirty after traveling all day. Meet in the lobby in an hour? That works for me. We hung up, and I rang Javier just to give him the time frame and then went to freshen up myself. We were all silent during the trip to the morgue. Even though what we were going to do wasn't a fun thing, it was nice to see more of the area. We were on different roads than the ones I had taken to get to the resort from the airport, and I saw several restaurants and shops that I would love to check out. Finally, we arrived, and Javier parked in front of a tiny rundown building. I was sitting in the back with Belinda, though it felt weird, like Javier was driving Miss Daisy or something. I hadn't wanted to leave Belinda in the back on her own, and she had refused the front seat. I leaned over the front seat. "Are you sure this is it?" "I don't see a sign or anything," I said. "This is it," Javier replied. I sat back in the seat and looked at Belinda, who hadn't even looked out the window as we'd been driving. She had just stared at her hands most of the time. "Are you ready to go in?" I said softly. I wasn't about to rush her, and if we had to sit out in the car for a while, so be it. I don't think you can ever be ready for something like this. But yes, I want to go in and get this over with. Her voice cracked a little. I grabbed her hand and squeezed it, and she looked at me gratefully. "Thank you again for coming with me. Let's just do this." We all got out and walked up to the door. It was locked, and there was a sign that said, "Ring buzzer for help." I rang the buzzer, and a few seconds later, a voice came across the static-filled intercom. "How can I help you?" I looked at Belinda, who just looked back at me, and I guessed I was the unofficial spokesperson. "Hi there. We're here to identify a body. Bessie Vincent." The voice behind the intercom didn't respond, but a couple of seconds later, I heard the door being unlocked. We opened it and walked in to see an older gentleman in scrubs and glasses, standing there with a file in his hand. "Are one of you Belinda Trent?" he said, looking at all of us, even Javier, though that should have been an immediate exclusion. "I am," Belinda whispered. "Then come with me." No wonder this guy worked in the morgue. He didn't have much of a bedside manner. Belinda didn't say anything or move, and I glanced over at her. She just looked terrified. "Can I come back with her for moral support?" I said, even though that was the last thing I wanted to do. However, she looked so lost, I felt I had to help her. "Sure, doesn't matter to me," he said in an almost bored voice. "I'll just wait here," Javier said, and took a seat in one of the plastic chairs that lined the hallway. The guy didn't even introduce himself and just motioned for us to follow him down the hallway. We finally got to a door, and he stopped, looking back at us. "I know this can be unsettling for family members. It will be quick, and then I will need you to sign a form, and you can be out of here," he said, finally showing some compassion. "Are you ready?" After a few moments, Belinda nodded, and the guy led us into the room. Glaring lights illuminated the sterile space. A table on the right held what appeared to be Bessie's body under a discolored sheet. The man walked to one side and motioned for Belinda to get closer. She took a couple of steps and stopped. It must have been enough for him because he went and pulled back the sheet, exposing Bessie's face, which was barely recognizable, partly due to what was obviously a gunshot wound on her temple that hadn't been visible to me when I first discovered her. Belinda choked back a sob and dropped her head in her hands, crying softly. The man covered Bessie back up. I'm assuming her reaction was an affirmative to Belinda's confirmation of Bessie's identification. He led us out of the room and told us to have a seat on the chairs outside, the same kind of cheap, uncomfortable chairs that had been in the front when we left Javier. He left us sitting there and disappeared into another room, coming back a few minutes later with a clipboard holding paperwork. "I just need you to sign the top page confirming that the body is Bessie Vincent," he said, holding out the clipboard. Belinda dabbed her eyes with her tissue and took it along with a pen, signing in a shaky hand and handing it back. "That's it. You can leave." "What about her things?" I asked. Not that I knew if she had anything with her or not, but it seemed like a logical question to ask. "You will have to talk to the police about that. Sit here for as long as you need to, and then you can follow the exit signs to get back outside." He walked away without a second thought. As callous as one might become, after years in that career, it seemed like it shouldn't be too hard to have a bit of compassion. "Let's get out of here, okay?" I said to Belinda, and she followed me and Javier back out to the car. Belinda didn't say a single thing on the way back, which bothered me. I felt a bit afraid for her well-being. She had been through a lot. "Is there anything I can do for you, Belinda?" I said, when we made it back to the hotel and she was ready to go back to her room. "Yes, you can find who killed my sister." Chapter 4. Javier and I got Belinda settled without me responding to what I considered an insane request. But when we headed back to my room, Javier asked me about it. "So, are you going to help her?" he said, with a little more excitement in his voice than I thought necessary considering the topic. "Help her find out who killed her sister? I'm not the police. I don't know what she's thinking." "Well, I'm sure you could do just as fine as our police." A funny statement since he didn't know me or what I did for a living. "Are you saying that your police aren't good?" Javier looked around him, almost as if he wanted to make sure no one was listening. The hallway was empty, and he continued talking, so he must have deemed it safe. "I'm not saying our police aren't good, but like I said, they have more experience with robberies, and well, last year there was a big to-do about police corruption." "Are you trying to say the police are corrupt, and they won't do a good job trying to solve what has to be a murder?" I was convinced she was too excited about the trip to have committed suicide. "I'm not really saying anything because I don't know anything for sure. Did that doctor guy tell Belinda her sister was murdered?" He didn't actually say much of anything. His personality left a lot to be desired, not much of a bedside manner. He didn't say anything about how Bessie died, nor did Belinda ask, but unless she shot herself, my guess is it was murder. I explained to him what I saw. His eyes grew wide, and he looked a little pale himself. I understood. It was one thing to talk about murder in the abstract. It was completely another. To know firsthand that it happened, even to someone he'd never met. I noticed his initial greeting left a lot to be desired. "Anyway, I'm here to help if you decide to help Belinda." We reached my door. "I'm not equipped to help Belinda. I own a bookstore. I'm not a police officer." "You've probably read a lot of mysteries though, right?" "That right there puts you ahead of most," he said, walking over to the refrigerator, opening the door, and getting a Diet Coke. "I know you didn't ask for one, but I'm sure you need one." He got a glass and some ice, and when he finished pouring the Diet Coke over ice, he added a straw and handed it to me. I appreciated the straw. It made the taste that much better. "Thank you. Why don't you have a seat?" I said, sitting on one of the sofas and motioning for him to sit on the other one. "Only if you're sure. I don't want to bother you." "You're not at all a bother. In fact, fix yourself something to drink if you would like." "That's very nice of you. I will take you up on that. Do you want a snack? There are pretzels, nuts, or dried papaya," he said while fixing his own drink. "No, my stomach can't handle anything right now. I should be hungry, but the events of the day had taken away my appetite." Javier finally sat down. "This is the first time anything like this has happened at the resort, at least in the time I've been here, and I started working here right out of high school, almost 10 years ago. I wouldn't imagine a resort this nice would have much crime. It doesn't. Every once in a while, we will get pickpockets on the beach, but that's really the extent of it," he said. "I just can't imagine who would want her dead, though why should I? It's not like I knew her. Maybe she did have enemies." "You are curious," he said in a teasing tone. "Of course I'm curious. There's just a big difference between being curious and actually trying to figure out what happened. You know I can get you in to see her room. Maybe something there would give you a clue." "Why do you want me to investigate this so much?" I asked. Obviously, I wasn't the only one curious. It was always my dream to be in the police force. I love anything true crime and watch it all the time, trying to figure out what happened before it's all unveiled. "Then why didn't you go to the police academy, or whatever the Belizean equivalent is here?" "I was a bit of what you would call a juvenile delinquent and made some mistakes in my earlier years that resulted in getting arrested twice. I never served any jail time or juvenile detention, but I had a record, and that is an immediate disqualification to join the police force here. But I promise you, I left all that behind years ago. We all make mistakes when we're young." He didn't seem like any kind of juvenile delinquent now, and I meant what I said. I had never gotten into trouble, but I knew other people had, and a few mistakes didn't define you for the rest of your life. "Do you want to?" he asked. "What? Go check out her room?" "Yes," he said after a moment's hesitation. "Could it get me in trouble?" I asked. "How could it? I can get in with the key so it's not breaking in and it's not like we're trying to take anything." I didn't really want to say yes. The reason I'd never gotten in trouble when I was young was that I was always too afraid of what would happen if I did anything wrong. Yes, I had been that kid, the goody two-shoes, but there was a part of me that was curious about who would have wanted to kill Bessie. I also felt bad for Belinda and knew that closure would help her, even though I was all for leaving things to the proper authorities. Now Javier was making me think twice. "Come on, we'll be in and out in 5 minutes tops. No one will ever know," he said, trying to persuade me. "Fine, but I'm doing this more for you than for me," I said, even though it wasn't exactly true. Javier jumped up and practically raced to the door. I would have laughed at his enthusiasm had we not been about to go check out the dead woman's room. I got up, slid my sandals back on, and followed Javier out the door. We had to go down 2 floors, and as we got off the elevator, my nervousness grew. Are you sure we won't get in trouble for this? I'm sure. It's fine, Javier said, seemingly at ease. That did little to ease my jitters, which grew exponentially once we reached Bessie's room and there was caution tape across the door. I looked at the yellow tape with black letters and thought at least that was standard across countries. I don't know about this, Javier. The tape looked scary. The tape comes off and we can stick it right back on, he said, opening the door. Javier remained undeterred, and against my better judgment, I followed him inside. Bessie had a normal room, which was still very spacious and beautiful, though 4 of them could fit in my suite. I saw her suitcase in the corner and her bed was made. Either she hadn't slept in it last night or she had made it this morning. I glanced in the bathroom and saw all of her toiletries neatly organized. I then went over to the dresser, opening a drawer and finding her clothes folded nice and neat. My guess was she was just an organized person. There's a laptop on the desk, Javier said. I walked over to join him and we stared at the computer for a second. There might be a clue on her computer. I'm not sure we should invade her privacy like that, I hesitated. You do realize she's not around, right? Sorry, I know that sounds harsh. Well, you have a point. I guess it wouldn't hurt. I went to lift the lid and Javier grabbed my arm. Wait, we probably shouldn't touch anything in case the police haven't dusted for prints yet. You do watch a lot of crime shows. He had a point, though, and not one I would have ever thought of. I needed to go back and wipe down the dresser drawer that I touched. I used the hem of my shirt to lift the computer lid, which made me feel even more like we shouldn't be doing this, and the display came on. In a few seconds, a box popped up, asking for a password. Well, so much for that idea, he said. You know, I read once that the majority of people use the easiest passwords. Still using the hem of my shirt to keep from putting my fingerprints on the computer, I typed in 1, 2, 3, 4, and hit enter. The screen said incorrect password. Then I tried 1, 1, 1, 1. Still didn't work. I'll try one more thing and then let's just get out of here. I typed in 0, 0, 0, 0 and hit enter. Much to my surprise, that opened the computer, which displayed her last email. As I scanned the contents, I was shocked. This is not what I had expected. Chapter 5. 2 or 3 minutes went by where Javier and I didn't speak. I knew I was just reading and rereading the email on the screen. I glanced over at Javier and saw he was doing the same thing, or at least it looked like it from the way his eyes were moving. Finally, he spoke up. That's not exactly what I expected to find when we came in here, he said. You think? I definitely wouldn't have believed it if someone had told me, but it was here in black and white. I know you didn't meet her, but she was just an average person. I would have never guessed in a million years she had something like this going on. I wonder if the police saw this, Javier said. I'm sure they did, though I'm surprised they left the computer here and didn't take it with them. They probably figured it was safe enough here. How many people here at the resort have access to this room? Like, how many people have those magic keys of yours, I asked. You mean the master swipe key? Yes. All the managers, housekeepers, and the butlers. So that's quite a few. It is, and I think I know where you're going. We are in here, and we shouldn't be. So what's stopping anyone else from coming in? I can assure you we all love our jobs, and we wouldn't do anything to screw it up, like mess with a crime scene. You're here right now. But we're not messing with anything. We're just looking. He had a point, and maybe he was right that most of the employees wouldn't care to snoop. Do you really think she was being blackmailed? Javier asked. It's right there in the email. When her computer turned on, it had opened to the email we were viewing. You completed the first step. To maintain your secret, deliver the package to the location detailed in the instructions you'll find at the beach. If the package doesn't arrive on time, we will follow through on our threat. I wonder what the package is, Javier asked, swiveling his head to look around, as if he expected it to pop up somewhere. I'd initially come in adamant we would get in and out so we wouldn't get caught. But now that I knew Bessie had a secret, I was definitely more curious. Be careful not to touch anything with your fingers, but let's look around, I said, hoping I didn't come to regret this decision. We went through the closet, the dresser drawers, the nightstand drawers, and found nothing. I wiped off any places we touched so we wouldn't leave fingerprints. I don't know what the package is referring to, but it's definitely not here, Javier said. If it was, it's gone now. Wait a minute, I just remembered something. Let's go back to my room. We cautiously stuck our heads out the door to make sure no one was coming and stepped out. I waited while Javier put back up the crime scene tape. When he was done, I took off walking at a brisk pace to the elevator and he rushed to catch up to me. What is it? "What did you remember?" he asked. "That email said someone would give her a location when they met on the beach. When I found her, there was a piece of paper close to the body that I just thought was someone's trash. What if she met someone to get the location and it was on that piece of paper, but then someone killed her and dropped it?" Javier's eyes grew wide with excitement. "You didn't give that evidence to the police?" "I had no idea it was evidence. I thought it was trash, and I slipped it in my pocket to throw away when I reached the next trash can. Then I found Bessie, and well, I kind of forgot about it. Plus, it still could be trash, and we got to my room, and I went over to the clothes hamper and pulled out the capris I had worn this morning. I reached into the pocket, pulled out the paper, and unfolded it. Look, it has an address on it," I said excitedly. "Do you recognize this address?" "It's in the downtown area, and I believe that address is maybe 1 or 2 blocks from the main strip." "What's in that area?" I asked. "Not a lot. The economy has hit us hard. We depend on tourism, and when rich folk like you can't afford vacations, well, that impacts us. A lot of the buildings off the main strip are empty. I won this vacation. Trust me, I couldn't have afforded it in a million years. I feel very fortunate and grateful to be here." "Somehow that doesn't surprise me," he said. "Why?" "Because you seem uncomfortable asking me to do things, and you're really nice." Despite the situation, I had to laugh. Are rich people not nice? I shouldn't make a huge blanket statement like that, but let's just say most aren't as nice as you are. "Well, thank you." Javier looked over my shoulder at the note. "It says 10 p.m. on there. Do you think that means she was supposed to meet someone tonight?" My guess would be yes. If not, wouldn't it have said a different day? That would make sense. "I get off work at 8, so I can take you there if you want." "I thought you had to work around the clock, and I'm not so sure we should go anywhere." "Technically, yes. When I am assigned to a guest, I work 24/7. However, I still need to eat, sleep, and all that kind of fun stuff, so our rules say we are in the building from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But we may be off-site otherwise as long as we immediately respond to our phone and are within 15 minutes of the resort. I hope you get paid well. That's a grueling schedule." "The resort pays really well, and it's not that bad. My family isn't but a 10-minute bike ride from here, and unless we are short-handed, we get a week off in between guests, which gives me plenty of time to have a life." "As long as you get time off for being on 24/7, that's not bad. Is this address within 15 minutes of the resort?" I didn't know the area well, but I knew we passed through town to get to the resort. It was more than 15 minutes, or at least I thought it was. "No, it's not, though it's close. But if I'm with you, that 15-minute rule doesn't apply because it is my job to make sure I'm fulfilling whatever need you have, and you need a driver." I thought for a second, but then I realized there wasn't much to think about. I was too far in this now. If I didn't go tonight and attempt to find out what this was all about, I knew I would regret it. "Fine. I'll meet you in the lobby at 9:30. I hoped I wasn't getting us into something dangerous, but I guess we would soon find out. Chapter 6. I had a few more minutes before I needed to go meet Javier for the 9:30 rendezvous that I still wasn't sure we should be doing. Right now, I was having a hard time figuring out what to wear. I had packed for a beach vacation, but a sundress, pastel capris, and flip-flops didn't seem like the right outfit for what we were about to do. I hadn't brought an all-black outfit. Knowing I was running out of time, I finally settled on the one pair of workout clothes that I had brought along with my tennis shoes. I couldn't help but think that at least now I could justify packing them because even as I had put them in my suitcase, I figured they would be a waste of space. I had a hard enough time motivating myself to work out at home, much less on vacation. Dressed and ready to go, I grabbed my purse, slinging it over my shoulder and double-checking to make sure the key to my room was in there. Although with Javier around, locking myself out wasn't that big of a concern. I got down to the lobby, and of course, Javier was already waiting. Instead of his normal hotel uniform, he had on black sweatpants, a black t-shirt, and even black shoes. I wanted to laugh, but I couldn't, because I had been frustrated that I didn't have any black clothes with me, like we were cat burglars or something. "Are you ready?" he asked, and he seemed a little nervous. Somehow, that made me feel better to know that I wasn't the only one who might be second-guessing the wisdom of this evening excursion. "I'm ready." We walked out to a small SUV, much like the one he had driven to take Belinda and me to the morgue. "Do they just have a fleet of these cars for all of you butlers to drive us around?" I asked. "Pretty much. I packed a small cooler with some Diet Coke, water, and a few snacks." "You packed us snacks?" I said as I got into the passenger seat. "We're not going on an evening leisurely drive to see the sights." "I know." He chuckled nervously. "Habit. I shouldn't make fun of you because now I want a Diet Coke. Do you want anything?" No thanks, he said as he pulled out of the resort, and I reached back with my left hand, felt around for the cooler, lifted the lid, and grabbed a Diet Coke. We chatted as we drove into town, and I got to know more about him, his family, and the history of Belize. He was quite knowledgeable, and I enjoyed the history lesson. You're very good at your job, I said. I try. I'm very proud of our country, and not a lot of the guests care about the history. But when someone's willing to listen, I could talk all day. I would love to hear more sometime. We are coming up on 3rd Avenue, where we will turn right to go to the address on the paper, he called out. And a few seconds later, he turned right. Can you pull over? I asked. Sure. He looked for a spot to safely parallel park and did so. Then he turned and looked at me. Is something wrong? Are you changing your mind? I hope I didn't force you to do this. Not at all. It was completely my decision. I'm just thinking, should we have a plan? Are we just going to drive by? Or are we going to get out and check it out? I guess I hadn't thought that far ahead, Javier said after a brief pause. Me either. Until just now. Fine pair of detectives we make. I chuckled. I guess what we do depends on if the place looks like it has people there or not. Didn't you say you thought most of the area was empty? Yes, most. However, that doesn't mean people aren't occupying those spaces. I think you call those people squatters in the United States. Yes, we do. The city I live in is small and we don't have that problem, but I know in bigger cities, people who are homeless will often stay in abandoned buildings. Why don't we drive by, assess the situation, and then figure it out, I said. That's a great idea, he said, and pulled back out, heading toward the address. Okay, it's 2 buildings up on your left. Luckily, no one was behind him, so he could slow down as we passed the building. It looked exactly like the other buildings on the block, which were 2-story houses that at some point had been converted into businesses by the look of the signs on many of them. The one thing they all had in common was that they were in disrepair, and you could tell the businesses were closed and had been for a while. It looked sad, and I felt for the people. This is not one of the nicer areas. Please don't think the entire country is like this, Javier apologized. Not at all. Every town has its not-so-great areas. My guess is whatever Bessie was involved in, someone wanted to meet her here because it's not overly populated, and if you look, there aren't even locals walking around. It didn't look like anyone was there. What should we do? Javier said. I think we should park and go take a look, I said, my heart pounding as the words came out. I couldn't believe I had just suggested we go check out an abandoned building, but Javier took it in stride. He drove around the block and then down a side street, which put us close to the address without being on the main street. We could get closer if we parked right in front of the house, but I'm not sure that's the best idea. I would agree. This is perfect. Javier shut off the car, and we got out. There was ample light from the beautiful full moon lighting our way, even though there weren't any streetlights in this area. We walked around the corner, and before we got to the house, Javier cut down an alley. What are you doing? I don't think we should go in the front door, do you? Have you done this before? No, but I told you I watch a lot of crime shows, he said with a grin. We went through the alley and then cut through a backyard. The grass was high, and I just hoped I didn't step in a hole or trip over something. Even if it had been daylight, it would have been hard to see in the tall grass. Sorry, I guess I didn't think about the condition of the yards, he said. It's fine. That's why I wore my tennis shoes. We made it to the backyard of the house, and things were just as dark from the back as from the front. I was glad there were more trees here because the last thing I wanted was to run into people or to trip and fall and break my neck. Javier was a lot braver than I was. I could have been content looking at the house from my position in the backyard, but he walked confidently up to the back door and turned the knob. It's locked, he called in a loud whisper over his left shoulder, which wasn't a surprise. Walking back down the couple of steps that had led up to the door, he walked over to a window, and I finally stopped being chicken and joined him. We both peered in the window to see a kitchen area. It was empty except for a small dining table, so we moved down to the next window. What is all that? I said to him as I looked in the window. I have no idea. It honestly looks like an oversized copy machine. We have something that looks a lot like it at the resort that we use to print flyers, menus, and stuff. Why would there be an abandoned house with a copy machine in the living room? I don't know, but clearly it's not as abandoned as someone wants us to think. Do you think they're counterfeiting money and Bessie knew about it? He said excitedly. I know nothing about counterfeiting money, but I don't think you can make counterfeits on a copy machine. At least not ones that will pass inspection. Maybe not for US dollars. Belizean money might be easier to counterfeit, though I honestly don't know. He had a point, but what could Bessie possibly have to do with Belizean counterfeiting that would have someone blackmailing her? It had to be something that started in the United States, even though it was odd that someone brought her down here. Why Belize? It looked like I had a lot of questions to get answered. Chapter 7. When my alarm went off the next morning, I struggled to open my eyes. Even though I had gone to bed exhausted, I couldn't sleep. It was one of those nights where you felt you were falling asleep, and then 2 minutes later, your alarm went off. Sitting up, I saw I had texts from Cora and Sally saying they hoped I was having the best time. I was definitely having an interesting time, just not seeing as much of the beach as I, or they, expected. I sent them both a text that things were great and I was having the best time. Telling them what I was really doing would only make them worry, and that's the last thing I wanted. Then I sent a text to my son to check in. Cody replied right away, and I teased him about texting while he was in school. He then tried to turn it on me and said that I shouldn't be texting him in the first place. He cracked me up. I was so lucky to be his mom. The sun peeked through the curtains, promising another glorious day in paradise, which helped motivate me to get out of bed. I had made plans with Belinda yesterday to meet for breakfast and didn't want to cancel on her because I was sure she was still struggling to come to grips with everything. Not only did I want to support her, but also wanted to see if she knew why Bessie would meet someone at an abandoned building that wasn't exactly abandoned. I just needed to find a way to bring it up that wasn't insensitive. I threw the covers off and got up, hoping a shower would wake me up, and it did. After dressing in a peach-colored sundress with a palm leaf print and slipping on my flip-flops, I headed down to the beach cafe to meet Belinda. Walking up to the hostess stand, I scanned the restaurant and spotted Belinda at a table, hunched over her phone. "I see the person I'm meeting," I said to the hostess as I walked by her and headed to Belinda. "Good morning?" Belinda looked up from her phone. Her eyes were red-rimmed with dark circles under them, leading me to believe she hadn't slept any better than I had. Not that I had expected her to. "Good morning. Can I get you some coffee?" the waitress said, appearing from nowhere as soon as I sat down. It was the same one who had waited on me yesterday. "I would love some." "Your name is Sylvia, right?" I asked. "Yep, you remember from yesterday?" She seemed happy about that fact. I suppose most people on vacation didn't take the time to learn the names of the people who were working hard to make their vacation grand. How could I forget? "You make the best lattes, and that's what I would like if it's not too much trouble." "Vanilla latte with a splash of hazelnut coming right up." "Ma'am, can I get you a refill?" She turned to Belinda. "Actually, I'll have what she's having." Sylvia nodded and left to get our drinks. Belinda set her phone down and put her hands in her lap. She had this nervous energy about her, like she didn't know what to do. "How are you holding up?" "Okay, I guess." I never realized how much red tape there was to get a body transported to the United States. I hoped that was something I'd never have to find out. "I'm so sorry, Belinda. I just can't even imagine what you're going through." At first, I was worried that the investigation would slow things down, but I have a feeling that's going to be a breeze compared to getting my sister back home. "Have you talked to the police?" "I mean, since yesterday morning. Do they know what happened?" I had hoped I would be able to find a way to bring this up without seeming insensitive, but luckily, she did it for me. "No. I suppose I should reach out to them today." "Is it bad that I don't want to?" "Of course I want to know what happened to my sister, but I'm also afraid to know what happened. I don't need to have unpleasant thoughts associated with her, and does it really matter?" I can understand that, and I did. However, I wouldn't be able to bear not knowing if it were my sister. "But then part of me wants to know who could have done this and make them pay," she said, contradicting herself, "though it won't bring her back." "It's hard to say how I would feel in your shoes because I'm not. I think I would want to know, though. It would eat away at me if I didn't. Did your sister know anyone down here?" Belinda shook her head. "No. And I would know. We were very, very close." "What made you guys pick Belize for vacation?" "That was all Bessie. You see, my husband died last year and I've been in a bit of a funk. She arranged this vacation, booked and paid for it, and didn't give me an option to back out. Bessie said Phil, that was my husband, wouldn't want to see me depressed like this. She was right, of course, except now things are even worse. All because she wanted to cheer me up. I feel like this is all my fault." Poor Belinda. I had forgotten Bessie told me why she had arranged this vacation. "I'm so sorry about your husband. I can't imagine going through that, and now this. But you can't for a minute think that this is at all your fault. This could have just as easily happened in California as here." "You sound like Bessie," she said, giving a slight smile. Sylvia arrived and set down our lattes. Can I get you anything else right now? She asked. No, thank you, Belinda said. I'm good for now, too, thanks. Why do I sound like Bessie? I asked Belinda after Sylvia walked away. She always looked at the bright side of things. Bessie was the most optimistic person I knew. She could be a bit of a mess, which drove me insane, but she was always happy, always positive. I'm gonna miss that. What do you mean she was a bit of a mess? She was one of those people who was never on time, forgetful, her house full of clutter, but you can't get mad at them because they're so genuinely sweet and disarming. She also always saw the good in people, which wasn't one of her best traits. It took forever for her to realize that ex-husband of hers was a lying, cheating louse. Have they been divorced long? Legally, no, but they had been separated for years before their divorce was finalized last year. That's a lot to deal with. Divorce is painful enough without it dragging on, I said. He had a bunch of legal issues, and she said she didn't want to pile on by pushing him for the divorce. Like I said, she saw way too much good in people. We finally ordered and spent the rest of breakfast with me listening to her reminiscing about Bessie, which was fine by me, since it seemed to lift her spirits a little. We left breakfast with her saying she was going back to her room to rest, and I headed back to my room to meet Javier. He had texted me a few minutes ago telling me he had some information. When I got off the elevator and headed to my room, he was standing outside the door, leaning against the wall. You could have gone in, I said, and he looked horrified. Go into a guest room when they're not there? We don't do that without an invitation. Consider yourself invited. This is my home away from home for the rest of my stay, so come and go as you please. I realized I'd only known him for less than 48 hours, and Cora and Sally would probably be worried that I gave him unfettered access. But he was a good kid, and I had nothing of value to steal anyway. He swiped his key and we walked in. Can I get you anything? No thanks, I'm full from breakfast and Sylvia makes the best lattes. That she does. So, what is this news that you have? I asked. I looked at the phone records from Bessie's hotel room and she didn't make any calls except for a couple to one number. Is that legal? To look at someone's call history? Can it get you fired? I asked, concerned for him. He waved his hand to dismiss my concerns. Legal? I have no idea, but it won't get me fired. She called someone who was staying here at the hotel. His name is Pete Aiden. He's an American businessman, and by his records, he has stayed at this hotel 3 times in the past year. The most interesting part is his address is in California, just like Bessie's. Do you think he had something to do with her death? I'm not thinking anything yet, except for the fact she talked to him on the phone yesterday morning, a couple of hours before you found her on the beach. We need to talk to this guy, I said. Javier grinned. I was hoping you would say that. I have a plan. Chapter 8. You're excited about this, I said to him a few minutes later as I listened to his plan. I am. Does that make me a bad person? He asked, looking contrite. No. It's not like you wanted her dead. There's nothing wrong with being curious about what happened. I could see relief across his face. Thanks for that. I thought maybe I was getting too excited about someone's demise. I don't take it that way at all. Now, what is this plan of yours? Based on his hotel records, it seems like he is a man who likes routine. All of his charges go to his room and he eats breakfast, lunch, and dinner all at the same times in places. Then it looks like he has a pre-dinner cocktail in our lounge every day at 4. Are you saying we should accidentally run into him at one of these times? I said, reading between the lines. Yes, but not we. You. Why just me? Trust me. I would love to come with you, but I can't. The butler assigned to him would take it as I was trying to poach his client, and that is something that could get me fired. Okay, that makes sense. I didn't think about that. However, I'm not well versed at going up to strange men and striking up a conversation. This is a resort. The atmosphere is different here than if you were just at a bar trying to pick someone up. Didn't you tell me you met Bessie randomly at dinner? True, but she was a female. It's easy to strike up a conversation with a female your own age. I understand, but we don't have any other option if we want to talk to this guy. Javier was right. I guessed it just all depended on how much I wanted to pursue this. After what we had found last night and realizing Bessie was involved in something that could have gotten her killed made me a little bit nervous. Are you having second thoughts about investigating? We don't have to, he said, like he could read my mind. A little. Last night was nerve-wracking. I can understand. It was nerve-wracking for me too, but it also made me even that much more curious. Don't you want to know why she was meeting someone there and what those machines are for? That was the problem. I did want to know. As I had tossed and turned last night, I had thought a lot about just forgetting all of this had happened and enjoying the rest of my vacation, but I couldn't. I didn't feel right about abandoning Belinda, and my curiosity was getting the best of me. Okay, do you have any idea on when would be best to talk to him? I think our best chance is at lunch. I did a little asking around. He is usually with other people during his pre-dinner cocktail and dinner. He dines alone at breakfast and lunch. None of that sounded appealing, but I couldn't deny I wanted to know about his relationship with Bessie or why they spoke. Any ideas on how I just randomly start talking to him at lunch and ask him about his conversation with Bessie? Just be yourself. You're easy to talk to. That wasn't a lot of help. Are you sure I shouldn't change into something nicer? I asked Javier a few hours later as I was getting ready to go try to talk to this Pete Aiden. My stomach was churning with nerves. It was almost like I was going on a blind date or something, which I guessed I kind of was. Except my date wasn't a date and he had no idea I was showing up. It was like a one-sided date. You're fine. You look amazing in that sundress. And he's having lunch at the Bay Lounge, which during the day is very casual. Well, it's casual at night too, but at lunch people go in their bathing suits. That would never happen, I said emphatically. Stop being so nervous. You're going to do fine. Easy for you to say, I said, giving him a dirty look. And he just smiled. Come on, stop fussing with your hair so we can head down. I listened to Javier because I was just killing time. What I was about to do was way out of my comfort zone, and I wanted to avoid it as long as possible. We got to the Bay Lounge and walked in, standing over to the side. The hostess recognized Javier, of course, and must have assumed since I was with him, I didn't need her help and just smiled at us. There he is, Javier said and pointed over to the right. The guy in the khakis and a white shirt, I asked. No, more to the right. There's that empty table to the right of that. Oh well, that guy didn't seem nearly as approachable. The guy in the khakis and a white t-shirt seemed like your average person. Pete Aiden was not your average person. He didn't even seem like an average business person. Here we were in the tropics, and it was in the 80s, yet he was in a suit. Granted, he had thrown his jacket over a chair, but even from here, I could see his crisp, pressed white shirt. Probably had on fancy shoes and not the flip-flops everyone else had on. He was probably in his mid-60s, but I didn't have a clear view of his face since he was wearing mirrored sunglasses. Not an unusual thing for people eating here, as it was very sunny outside. Let's get you to your table, Javier said, and took off toward the empty table. I followed him, not wanting to, but trying to muster up the courage to go through with this. Javier pulled out a chair for me. Your waitress will be right with you. He gave me a wink and left me in the proverbial lion's den. He sat me so I faced Pete Aiden. I guess to give me a better chance to make eye contact. The waitress came over and I ordered a salad and an iced tea, though I wasn't sure how I was going to eat the way my stomach was doing somersaults. I pulled out my phone and pretended like I was doing something, not wanting to just sit here and stare at the guy. He was also on his phone, but after a few minutes, he set it down and reached for his drink, looking over in my direction. He smiled and nodded like one would do when they caught the eyes of a stranger. I did the same, still at a loss at how I was going to strike up a conversation with this guy when he took off his sunglasses and spoke to me. Here alone? He asked. I almost didn't catch his words because his eyes were the clearest blue, just like the ocean. I wasn't sure I had seen such a blue before. In fact, I am, I said after a moment, hoping my smile wasn't too cheesy. My nerves were getting the best of me. Would you like to join me, he said, completely taking me off guard. I tried to get a read on him. Was he one of those men who just hit on anyone around? Or did he just want some company in this beautiful paradise? He must have taken my silence for apprehension, which was correct because he spoke up again. I promise I'm not a creep. I just thought if you didn't want to eat alone, and I know it's not my favorite thing, we could enjoy lunch together and go our separate ways. No pressure. He seemed genuine and didn't give me any creepy vibes. Since the whole point of this was to talk to him, I said sure, just as the waitress came back with my iced tea. Is it okay if I move over to sit with him? I said to her. Of course, it is fine. She took my place setting and my drink and set it over across from him, and I got up and moved. I'm Pete Aiden, he said when I sat down. Trixie Pristine. Nice to meet you, Trixie. What brings you here? And that's how we started the conversation, and I found out that Pete Aiden seemed to be a genuinely nice guy. Chapter 9. I walked out of the restaurant after lunch with Pete, and Javier practically jumped out at me from behind a palm tree. I wasn't expecting it, so I was startled. Sorry, he said. I didn't mean to scare you. Why were you hiding behind the tree? I was trying not to be obviously lurking around. Then I got so excited when I saw you, I didn't think about the fact that you couldn't really see me. Anyway, how did it go? Let's go sit outside. It had been so nice sitting out there for lunch that I wanted more of it. I had never been a sun worshiper in the sense of lying out and being tan, but the feel of the sun on my face, even in the winter, had always made me happy. I didn't want to waste any of this beautiful weather. Sure. The resort had a lot of covered space with seating that allowed you to sit outside, but not be under the direct sunlight. We walked over to one of the teal and peach couches and sat down. It was kind of amazing how clean the cushions were, considering the number of people who sat on them and the fact that they were outside. Javier didn't give me much time to think about the cushions, however, because he started asking me questions. How was it? You guys seem pretty chatty. Did he say anything about Bessie? What's your read on him? He fired at me. Actually, he seems like a pretty nice guy. I almost wanted to laugh when I saw the disappointment in Javier's face. However, I understood because it would have been nice if my conversation with Pete Aiden had resulted in an aha. He killed Bessie. Did he say anything about Bessie? I didn't directly ask him if he had met another guest named Bessie, though it wouldn't surprise me since he was very quick to ask me to join him for lunch. Did you know he has a proclivity for dining with strangers? Javier had the decency to blush. I had a feeling he had that intel but hadn't told me so as not to scare me away. I didn't wait for him to answer. That's fine. It all worked out. Do you think that's how he met Bessie? From seeing her and asking her to eat with him? I didn't ask him for a list of everyone he had dined with since being here, if that's what you're asking. Though I do get the sense he's pretty gregarious and not in a creepy way. He didn't come across like that, nor did he try to ask me out. Besides, didn't you say they had a phone conversation the morning she died? Yes, there were 2 calls really early. Then I'm not sure they would have had time to eat together. When I met her, she said she had just gotten in that afternoon about the same time I arrived. My guess is she already knew him. There is one interesting bit of information I did get. What? Javier interrupted me. Pete, Mr. Aiden, is also from the Fresno, California area. It could be a coincidence, or maybe not. I did ask him what he did for a living, and he gave me a vague response about something in finance. I told you he was from California. I know, but it's a huge state. Now that I know he came from the same area, that changes things. Do you think maybe Bessie had some kind of investment with him that went wrong? Javier asked. It's too bad you weren't able to ask him more direct questions. Well, I have another chance. What do you mean? He asked me to join him for dinner and I said yes. Javier clapped his hands together with excitement. Why didn't you say so in the first place? Hopefully, this time you can get some more concrete information from him. Hopefully. I thought maybe in the meantime, we could try to figure out what those machines were. That might help us figure out what Bessie was into. Tonight, I'm going to see if I can get any specific information from him. Is this like a date? I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't consider it as one, and I'm not treating it as one. I doubt he is either. We're just 2 people on vacation who don't want to dine alone. Javier nodded, and while I knew a vacation romance wasn't unheard of, it definitely wasn't in the cards for me, and not with Pete Aiden. After my lunch with Pete, Javier and I tried searching the internet to see if we could find out what those machines were. All we could come up with was what we already thought, and that was a copy machine of some sort. Javier was certain they were printing money. And while he was right that the machine was capable of printing money, money wasn't that easy to print and pass off as true currency. It took more Googling for me to convince him of that fact. Then we tried figuring out what could be printed that clearly wasn't on the up and up, but by the time it was ready for me to get dressed for dinner, we still hadn't thought of anything. Not anything that made sense anyway. I sent Javier off to do whatever it was that he did when he wasn't waiting hand and foot on clients, mostly so I could get ready for dinner in peace without him chattering in my ear about all the things that I should ask Pete about. I was already nervous enough, though I didn't exactly know why, since this wasn't a date. Maybe because it wasn't just a dinner. It was a mission to get information. Javier said, among other things, that Pete's dining preference, where he'd invited me to eat, had 3 Michelin stars, guaranteeing delicious food. My prize-winning vacation package covered everything at the resort, so I didn't need to let him pay, which made me feel slightly better about dinner. Glancing in the mirror one more time, I decided I looked as good as I was going to get, and headed down to the dining room. Even though this wasn't a date, and I didn't want a vacation romance, I still wanted to look my best. As I reached the entrance, I saw Pete approaching, and he noticed me out of the corner of his eye and stopped until I reached him. You certainly look stunning, he said, taking my hand and giving it a light kiss. A very old-fashioned and nice gesture. You don't look so bad yourself. And he didn't. The suit he had on at lunch was nice, but this one was definitely nicer. I didn't know the brand, since I wasn't that much of a fashionista. However, it fit him well, and I knew that often meant tailored. And I knew that was expensive. "Aiden, for 2, he said to the hostess, who quickly showed us to our table. Immediately after we sat down, someone brought in bread and olive oil, and then another gentleman arrived with a bottle of wine. "Could I interest you in a glass of our house red?" the sommelier asked. "I wouldn't mind a glass," he said. "You? One wouldn't hurt me." The sommelier did his thing, pouring a small amount in Pete's glass and waiting while Pete swished it around and took a sip. After tasting it, Pete nodded, and the sommelier filled our glasses. No sooner had he left than the waiter approached. This place had great service. I had to hand it to them. The waiter went through the specials. It was hard to decide what to get, but finally Pete and I ordered. "I'm not much of a wine drinker, but this is nice," I said. "Me either. But I figured one glass with dinner wouldn't hurt. Cheers to a great vacation," he said. "I know we briefly chatted at lunch, but what brought you to Belize for vacation?" I asked, wanting to get him talking. "I actually have some business to conduct here, and normally I would send one of my associates, but I thought it was a good time of the year to enjoy the tropical climate." "I get that, but I'm from the Midwest." "Don't you have good weather all year round in California?" "Yes, but we are about 100 miles away from the ocean, so I can't exactly sit outside on my deck and enjoy a view like this," he said, motioning to the view we had of the ocean. The way the resort was designed, every single one of the restaurants was built on the outer perimeter. There was a clear view of the ocean from almost every area, which I thought was a pretty smart design. "That makes sense. Have you met many people since you've been here?" He looked at me a little oddly, and I wondered if I was asking too many questions. I had let him do most of the talking at lunch. Maybe he preferred it that way, but that approach would not get me the answers that I wanted. "A couple, but not anyone I actually want to spend time with, if that's what you're asking," he said. Oh no. The last thing I wanted was for him to think that I was angling for this to be more than just a friendly dinner. "I didn't mean that. I was just curious. My first night here, I met a woman named Bessie. She had made a reservation for the Bay Lounge at the same time I had, except she accidentally made hers for the evening of the 15th. But it was the 14th, so I invited her to eat with me. It's not something I would probably do back home, but I figured why not? On vacation, it's fun to meet people." I watched him when I mentioned Bessie's name, and there was nothing. Not so much as a flinch. If he knew her, which he must since she called him, he certainly wasn't letting on. "I think it's good you did that. You can't meet people if you don't put yourself out there." "Have you done much exploring around town?" I asked, changing the subject. I didn't want to dwell on the Bessie topic and make him suspicious in case he had something to do with her murder, and that is why he acted like he didn't know her. "No. When I haven't been doing business, I've just been at the resort relaxing." "Is your business downtown here or in one of the neighboring cities?" "Here." "Where at?" "I've been downtown a couple of times, and there are just a lot of really interesting stores and shops," I said. "That there is." "Were you able to do much shopping when you were downtown?" he said, and started asking a bunch of questions of his own. I appreciated he seemed interested in finding out about me, but when I asked him where his business was, I could have been imagining it, but I swore an annoyed look flitted across his face. When he changed the subject, I couldn't help but wonder what it was he didn't want to tell me. Chapter 10. Last night, Javier showed me how to set the timer on the coffee pot. He had offered to come make me coffee himself or bring me some, but I said I'd rather just wake up slowly and enjoy the balcony off my room alone in the morning. When the aroma of the coffee woke me up before my alarm went off, I mentally gave myself a pat on the back for such a great idea. It was so much easier to wake up to the aroma of coffee, though not having to jump out of bed and go to work was also nice. I threw a light robe over my pajamas and poured a cup of coffee before grabbing my iPad and heading to the balcony. My plan for the day included reaching out to Belinda to see how she was doing and sending a picture of the machines Javier and I had seen to Cora and Sally. I knew that would make them ask what was going on, but the explanation would be worthwhile because I thought they could help us figure out the machine's purpose. Opening up the Kindle on my iPad, I tried to get lost in the story I had started to read on the plane. I had been at a crucial point of the story when the plane landed in Belize, and I had to stop reading and had been excited to get back to it. But this morning, I just couldn't get into it. Thoughts of dinner last night with Pete and how he didn't admit to knowing Bessie, along with worry about Belinda, distracted me. Once I had read the same passage several times, I decided to give up. Pouring another cup of coffee, I went back out to the balcony and called Belinda. She didn't pick up, so I left a message. I knew she said it was going to take time before she could send her sister back to the U.S., so hopefully She hadn't left yet. I then sent pictures of the beach off my balcony and what Javier had found in the group chat to Cora and Sally, and sat back while I waited for one of them to call me, which took all of about 15 seconds. That didn't take long, I said jokingly when I answered the phone. We absolutely have to know why you are sending us pictures of oversized copy machines. What kind of vacation are you on? Sally said. By the way, you're on speaker, and Cora's here. I take it business is slow right now? Yes, if you must know, but that's not the top of the conversation here. Why did you send us these pictures? Sally said impatiently. It was clear by their responses they knew I was doing something besides relaxing on the beach. I took a deep breath and told them everything. From getting here, meeting Bessie, finding her on the beach, to helping her sister, checking out the address on the piece of paper Bessie had when she died, and then lunch and dinner with Pete Aiden. You went on a date? Who are you and what have you done with my friend Trixie? Sally said. It had been a while since my last relationship, and Sally was always trying to get me to go out and meet people. Figured that's the one thing she would fixate on. It wasn't a date. It was strictly a fact-finding mission. Now focus. Do you have any idea what those machines could be? They look like printers of some sort, Cora said. Cora was a graphic designer, so if anyone knew printers, I guessed it would be her. That's what we thought they looked like, but they're just a lot bigger than your average printer, even for commercial projects, I would think. Do you really have a butler? Is he cute? Sally asked. I couldn't help but laugh. He's adorable, but way too young for me. And it's kind of weird having someone whose sole job is to wait on me hand and foot. I could completely get used to it, Sally said, and I agree with Cora that it looks like a giant copy machine. What would a giant copy machine be doing in an abandoned house in Belize? I asked. No idea, they chorused, which wasn't all that helpful. I heard a knock at the door. I assumed it was Javier, and even though I told him to just come and go as he pleased, he hadn't taken me up on that yet. Listen, someone's at the door. If you think of anything else those machines could be, let me know. Only if you promise to not spend your entire time helping this Belinda person. Yes, it's sad her sister died, but you need to be out having fun, Sally said. I will, I promise. We said our goodbyes, and I headed to the door, pulling it open without checking to see who was there. I opened the door and was surprised no one stood there. Looking both ways down the hallway and then down at the floor, I saw an envelope. I picked it up and turned it over. The plain white business envelope bore no external markings. Going back in and shutting the door, I thought it might be tickets to something that was part of my package. But when I opened the envelope and pulled out a single sheet of paper, unfolding it, it was anything but. You came here for vacation. If you know what's good for you, stick to that. The piece of paper started shaking, and I realized it was because my hands were shaking. I dropped the paper and went over to the phone, dialing Javier. Good morning, Trixie. What can I help you with? His upbeat voice somehow made me feel even more anxious. I don't need anything, but can you come up here right away? Is everything okay? No? Can you hurry? I'll be right there. I hadn't asked him where he actually stayed when he was on site, but it must not be far away because within 3 minutes he was at my door, and I knew it was exactly 3 minutes because I was staring at my phone, feeling like I should call someone but not knowing who I should call. The mechanism of the door clicked, and I looked over to see Javier walk in for the first time without knocking, and he rushed over to me. What's going on? You're shaking. What happened? I pointed to the paper on the floor where I had dropped it and took a seat on the couch. Javier picked up the paper and read it. Who left this for you? I don't know, I said and told him what happened. We have cameras everywhere. Can I use the phone? Of course. Javier walked over to the phone, and I'm not sure who he called. And even though I was within earshot, I wasn't listening because my brain just kept saying the words on that note. A couple of minutes later, Javier came and sat on the couch next to me. Is there anything I can get you? No, I'm fine. Well, I'm not fine. You know what I mean. I just don't know why anyone would leave that note for me. Maybe it wasn't even meant for me, even though as I said it, my gut told me it was. I called down to the security office. I said someone had knocked on your door, but then no one was there and you felt a little unsettled. We take customer security very seriously, so they pulled the video for this hallway that covers your room. It's a pretty sophisticated system. I've seen the control room a few times, and it's like an air traffic control station. I wondered if he was babbling because this note also unsettled him. I wanted to tell him to get to the point. Who did they see leave the note? I finally asked. That's just it. No one. I don't understand. How could no one leave a note in front of my door? They can't? This makes little sense, I snapped. I'm sorry. My nerves are just frayed. That's okay. I'm a little unsettled myself. George, the security guard currently on duty in the video room, said that either a weird software glitch occurred or a very clever person hacked the system to conceal who left the note. Javier didn't have to say it, and neither did I, but I knew we both thought there was no way that was a weird glitch in the software. It could only mean someone knew I was trying to find out who killed Bessie. Chapter 11. "What are you thinking about?" Javier said after a few minutes of us silently sitting on my couch. "I think I'm angry," I said slowly. "How dare someone try to scare me off?" And I did feel anger, along with some indignation. I didn't appreciate someone trying to bully me to get me to stop helping someone else. "Listen, I know I've encouraged you to do this since the beginning because of my love of true crime, but I never wanted to put you in danger." There was worry in Javier's voice. "You haven't made me do anything I didn't want to do. In fact, I think I'm about to ask you to do something you might not want to do, and if you don't, I completely respect that." "What are you talking about?" Javier asked. "Can you get us back into Bessie's room?" Javier's eyebrows shot up. "Yes." "But why? You didn't want to go there the first time." "I know, but that was before." Javier didn't have to ask what I meant by before. He knew I meant before this threat. Before, yes. I wanted to be helpful, because I felt bad for Belinda. And I did like Bessie, even though I hadn't known her long. Things were different now. It was personal. "Do you want to go right after you get dressed?" he said. I nodded, thinking we better go now before I lost my nerve. It didn't take long for me to get dressed, and Javier and I headed to Bessie's room. When we got there, it still had crime scene tape on it. Javier did the same thing he had done before, carefully lifting the crime scene tape off the doorframe before swiping to let us in. This time, neither one of us had to say anything, and we both were making sure not to touch anything with our bare hands. I looked around, and something felt off. "There is something different in here," Javier said. "You must be reading my mind. I don't remember the suitcase thing over on that wall." "Look at the desk," he said excitedly. I looked over, and the laptop was not in the same position it was the last time. Wasn't it almost exactly in the middle when we came before? I'm pretty sure it wasn't up in the right-hand corner like this. Who could have been here? I gave a nervous laugh. "I think we're being paranoid. The police were probably here. They might have let Belinda come in here and go through her sister's things." "You're right. So, what did you want to see here?" "When we were here before, we just looked at the one email she still had pulled up, but what if there were others that gave more clues to what happened? We didn't even look. We just bolted." Javier and I walked over to the desk, leaving the laptop where it was and lifting the lid. I wished I had gloves, and then I had to laugh. Why would I bring gloves to a tropical paradise? But I had thought to grab a washcloth from the room to make it easier to touch things without using my hands. I used it on the trackpad, a little surprised it actually worked, to go through her emails. "I don't want to spend a lot of time in here, so can you just take pictures of the emails?" I said, fishing my phone out of my pocket and handing it to Javier. For the next few minutes, I would open an email, and he would take a picture, and I would close it, going on to the next. I skipped things that looked like obvious advertisements, and she kept a pretty organized inbox because there were only about 30 messages sitting in her inbox that had come in before she died. I scanned all of the ones that came in after she died, and we took pictures of a few that had email addresses in common with emails prior to her death. Finally, I shut the lid to the laptop and looked at Javier. "Anything else you think we should look at?" "Not really, unless you think she might have hidden something somewhere." "That's genius." "It is?" "Of course it is," I said, walking over to the dresser, opening it, and instead of just looking in this time, I checked underneath clothes. I had been so nervous last time I had glanced inside and not really looked. If she was involved in something illegal, she could have hidden something in her room, especially if she suspected she might be in danger. She might have left something behind that might be a clue. "Now who's been watching a little bit too much true crime?" Javier said. He got down on his hands and knees and checked underneath the bed while I checked the nightstand. I even flipped through the Bible in the drawer and nothing. Javier went into the closet, checking the top shelf, underneath the extra pillows, and even lifted the iron out of its holder. "Okay, maybe I got too excited there for a second. It doesn't seem like there's anything in here. We should just head back to the room and look at those emails to see if we can find any information there," I said. "Wait, let me check one more place." He went over to the bed, lifted the mattress up from the box spring and checked in between the two, then went around to the other side and did the same thing. "I'm gonna lift the entire thing off the frame if you can check underneath." I found this a little ridiculous, but I wasn't going to argue. We might as well be thorough. Javier lifted the mattress up, and I gave a cursory glance when I saw something. "Wait a second. Hold right there." I went over and grabbed a small, folded-up piece of paper. You can drop it now. Whew, those things are heavier than you would expect. What did you find? I'm not sure, I said, unfolding the paper. It's a receipt, folded up inside this blank sheet of paper. Maybe it's somewhere she visited? I doubt it. It's from 2 years ago. I guess no one has replaced the mattress and box springs for a while. At least we have the emails. Why don't we head back to the room and see if we can find anything, Javier said. We got back to the room, and Javier fixed me a Diet Coke. I told him to help himself to anything he wanted, and he fixed himself a beverage as well. I liked that he was being a little less formal. I set my phone where we could both see so we could go through the emails. We each had paper and a pen to take notes, and I started reading. Every once in a while, I glanced up and could see Javier making notes, and I was doing the same. I just hoped we found something worthwhile. After a few minutes, I sat my pen down, and a few seconds later, Javier did the same. Did you want to go first with what you found? I asked. Sure. I don't know how much of it is meaningful. It looks like she has been talking to someone named Mr. Jones, but it's from a really weird email address that's just letters and numbers, which makes me think it's to hide the true identity. What did they say? That's just it. Nothing really stuck out, which is what made me find it odd. It didn't seem like they were friends because of the formality of the email, and they just kept talking about peacocks. You got more than I did. The only thing that didn't just seem work-related or personal is an email that told her that Maria Alvarez was a good contact for her to have in Belize. You don't happen to know anyone by that name, do you? By the way, the email also came from an alphabet soup email. Is it the same as mine? Javier said, showing me his notes so I could see the email address. No. So maybe none of this is related and it's all innocent. Maria Alvarez. For some reason that name sounds familiar. Do you mind if I call my aunt? Javier said. You want to make a family call right now? Not that I cared, it just seemed odd timing. My Aunt Lucia knows everyone on the island, and when I say everyone, I mean everyone. If Maria Alvarez is a local, she will know. Then by all means, please call her. Javier dialed the phone, and I stood up and walked up to the balcony to give him a little privacy. Even though I knew the reason for the phone call, it still felt wrong hanging over his shoulder. A few minutes later, Javier came out to the balcony. I have a really great aunt, he said. What did she say? She said Maria Alvarez was someone we should stay away from. And then she proceeded to lecture me on how I even came about to mention her name. And when she gets on a tangent, she goes on forever. That's what took me so long. Okay, what is the problem with Maria Alvarez? She said if you were to name the person who knew all the comings and goings of the criminal element here in Belize, it would be Madame Alvarez, as they refer to her. Now we were getting somewhere. Had Bessie run afoul of Maria Alvarez? Chapter 12. Do you really think this is a good idea? Javier said as we drove toward town. Do we really need to think about this in terms of good idea? Bad idea? I joked. You're the one who watches all the crime shows. Is everything they do a good idea? I think you're getting crime shows confused with horror flicks, where people never go down the right path. Wow, you're getting pretty dark. You don't know my Aunt Lucia? She doesn't give warnings lightly. The woman is not afraid of anything or anyone, and she seemed very adamant that we keep out of the way of Maria Alvarez. I'm not suggesting we find her and ask her about Bessie. I'm just saying we can get the lay of the land and see if we can pick up a certain vibe. Then we can decide what to do. A vibe that's going to get me in trouble if my aunt finds out I came up here. This is a small island, and Maria Alvarez could make trouble for my family if she's what my aunt says she is. Javier, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have been taking this so lightly. You can always drop me off so that you're not seen. I couldn't do that. As an employee of the resort, I am responsible for you. To a certain extent, I think this goes outside the scope of your butler duties. Still, I'm not about to let you do this on your own. Javier's aunt had told him that Maria often held court at the Peg Leg, which was an old seafood restaurant and bar out on the pier. It had been around forever, according to Javier, and he had always been warned not to go there. Javier told me it was definitely not on the list of tourist attractions. He had just never really known why. He said when he was young and he and his friends were warned away, they had made up a lot of fanciful stories. Little did he know that some of their stories weren't so far off from the truth. After I found out this information, I was curious to check out this Maria. Not that I wanted to do anything beyond sitting at the restaurant and maybe getting a glimpse of her. I really didn't know how that would be helpful, but we didn't have any other leads, so I figured it was better than nothing. I didn't want to just sit around at the resort. I was too antsy for that. We pulled into the parking lot of the Peg Leg, and it looked like any restaurant on the pier. How would tourists even know not to eat here, I asked. It's not that they don't eat here. It's that it's not on the list of preferred places. They don't advertise. Apparently, they just like to stay on the down low. We walked in, and it was about half full, which surprised me. I expected it to be empty, though I guessed even if the place wasn't advertised, it didn't mean people wouldn't stumble upon it. Welcome to the Peg Leg. Table for two, the hostess said. Yes, please, I answered. Can we sit at one of those tables? I motioned toward the front of the restaurant. I just like to watch people walk by. Sure. The hostess took us to a table, and after we sat down, Javier looked at me. I guess there's a reason besides people watching that you want to sit over here. I thought sitting over here would give us a better view of the restaurant. We need to see the people here and whoever might walk in to figure out who is you-know-who and if she's even here, I said, hesitant to use her name. A server came over and told us about the specials. I ordered a shrimp dish that sounded good along with an iced tea, but honestly, I wasn't as concerned with what we were going to eat as I was in my surroundings. I kept scanning the room, waiting for something to pop out at me, but I had no idea what. Everyone in the restaurant looked normal, and by normal, I meant like me. No one seemed like they might be some kind of crime boss. All the females in here looked like tourists, though that was somewhat interesting. It didn't seem like there were any locals in here, and I mentioned this to Javier. I don't think it's just because this is where she is alleged to hang out. Locals don't hang out here because they know they probably shouldn't. There are many restaurants off the beaten path that tourists would be hard-pressed to find, and that's where we prefer to eat out. Then why do you think she would pick a spot more populated by tourists than an off-the-wall spot? Your guess is as good as mine, he said as the waiter approached and set our food in front of us. Spicy grilled shrimp for the lady and the fried shrimp platter for the gentleman, the waiter said, setting our food down. My quest for Maria Alvarez was momentarily forgotten as I inhaled the aroma of the shrimp, which were easily twice the size of shrimp I got in the States. This looks fantastic, I said. Is there anything else I can get you right now? The waiter asked. I'm fine, I said and looked at Javier. We're fine, thank you. The waiter walked away and I took a bite. It was every bit as delicious as it smelled. I was so busy eating that I almost didn't even notice when a group of people walked in until Javier stopped eating, looked at me, and then looked over to the right. Standing by the bar was a woman probably in her mid to late 50s with jet black hair with a small chunk of silver framing her face in a severe bob. It wasn't just her no-nonsense hairstyle that made me take a second glance, but she was dressed in a black pantsuit and high heels. She definitely wasn't a tourist, and she wasn't casual like all of the other locals I had seen. I exchanged glances with Javier and knew we both thought the same thing. That woman was Maria Alvarez. 3 men with very serious expressions on their faces surrounded her. They didn't seem the type who laughed at anything. She had a couple of words with the bartender and then headed toward the back. She went through the double doors to the kitchen, but somehow, I didn't think she was going back there to cook anything. She must have an office of some kind back there, I said to Javier. It would make sense that she wouldn't want to hang out here in the open. The waiter came over. How is everything so far? Delicious. Can I ask you a question? I asked. Sure. Was that the owner who just walked in? The waiter paused. Who do you mean? He said innocently, and I was pretty sure he knew exactly who I was talking about. The woman who just walked in a business suit. I'm just assuming she's the owner since she's in a suit. What's her name? Oh, yeah, she's very busy, he said, avoiding my question. I don't want to bother her. I just wanted to say how amazing the food and the service are. If you could pass on the message? I'll pass it on. Enjoy the rest of your meal, and I'll be back to check on you in a bit. Make sure you save room for dessert. I almost had a heart attack when you asked him that question, Javier said. I kind of think he almost did too. He certainly didn't want to answer who she was. I thought about that while I finished my meal. We declined dessert as we were both stuffed. And honestly, I think we both wanted to get out of there. After the conversation with the waiter, he had been visibly tense around us. When we got up to leave, I noticed a guy in the corner. He had been there when we came in and had a few empty drink glasses, littering his table and a notebook in front of him, but he wasn't writing in it. He was looking at us. Maybe he was some aspiring novelist into people watching. Though somehow, I didn't think it was that innocent. We headed back to the hotel, no further ahead in figuring out who killed Bessie. Chapter 13. The next morning, I headed out on an excursion. I had done nothing at the resort, In the way of fun activities since I got here, and considering it seemed like everything investigative Javier and I did led to a dead end, I thought I should take advantage of what the resort offered. I felt a little guilty, but when I mentioned it to Javier, he said I shouldn't. It wasn't my responsibility to find Bessie's killer. And he was right. In fact, I still couldn't get a hold of Belinda. I even had Javier check and make sure she was still at the resort, and she was, so I didn't know why she wasn't responding to my calls. I dressed in shorts and tennis shoes today. The day trip was sightseeing, and one place we were going to were cliffs where people did cliff jumping. There was no way on earth I was jumping 100 feet off a cliff or whatever it was. I didn't care if it was 10 feet, I wasn't going to do it. I didn't have that big of a sense of adventure. However, Javier said the area was gorgeous, so even if I didn't want to go cliff diving, I would enjoy it. Making my way down to the lobby where the group was meeting, I had a few minutes to spare, so I thought I would try calling Belinda again. I tried from my cell phone, and then even went over to the house phone and dialed her room directly. Nothing. I understood she might just not want to talk to anyone, but now I was worried. She had been through a traumatic experience, and I wanted to talk to her and make sure she was okay. Everyone who is here for the cliff tour, please gather round, a young woman in a resort uniform called out. She was standing next to the sign for the tour and motioning for people to come closer. So I did. Good morning, my name is Inez. In a few minutes, we will board the bus to take us on what will be an amazing sightseeing trip to some of the best that Belize offers. We will make stops so you can get out and stretch your legs, do a little shopping, and immerse yourself in the culture. However, it is about an hour to our first stop, so if you want to grab some coffee for the trip, you have time to do so. The bus will have bottled water and light snacks. Does the bus have a bathroom? Someone called out. Good question. Yes. If you were worried about getting more coffee and then getting on the bus for a couple-hour drive, don't be. We all chuckled. Nice to know our guide had a sense of humor. I joined the short line to grab another cup of coffee and then followed the line to the bus. Because I had taken time to get coffee, I was toward the end of the line, so I started looking for empty seats next to people who seemed nice and not super chatty. Not that I was against talking to strangers, but I also didn't want to spend the entire time talking. I wanted to relax. I had brought a new book on the history of Belize, so I planned to learn more about the beautiful country on the drive to the cliffs. May I sit here? I said to a woman not much older than me as I got about halfway down the bus aisle. Of course, she said, patting the empty seat. My name is Helen. Trixie? I love that name. The Trixie Belden mysteries, along with Nancy Drew, were my favorites when I was a girl. That's who I'm named after. My mom was a huge fan and named me after Trixie Belden. And I agree with you, the books are amazing. When I was little, I wished I could have the adventures Trixie and her friends had. What brings you to Belize? Helen asked, and we began chatting. Even though I hoped to get some reading done, I enjoyed my chat with Helen, and before I knew it, we were pulling up to our first stop. Okay, everyone, Inez said. We will be here for 45 minutes. I know that's not a lot of time, but we have a lot to cover today. If you're hungry and want a snack, there are several food stands. And as you can see, there are booths with locally made wares. We do have space in the luggage area of the bus, so you don't have to worry about trying to bring all your purchases back to your seat. As we waited for the people in front of us to get up, I turned to Helen. Did you want to walk around together? Sure, I'd love that. Helen explained she was the first of her friend group to retire and no one else could get the time off, including her husband, but he had encouraged her to take the trip anyway. I told her I wholeheartedly agreed with her decision. Retirement was a huge milestone and should be celebrated. We got off the bus and walked around the shops where there were beautiful dresses and shawls. I bought Cora and Sally shawls made of a colorful tie-dye print that I knew they would both love. It felt like we had been walking around for barely 15 minutes when my alarm went off. I had set it to make sure we didn't lose track of time and get left behind. Goodness, is it time already? Helen said, and I nodded. She finished paying for her purchases, and we headed back to the bus. The next couple of stops were the same. There were so many things to see and just not enough time. We finally made it to the last stop. Once we got off the bus and I got a great view of the cliffs and the waterfall, the scenery before me was worth every minute of travel. This is amazing, I said to Helen as everyone from the group had gotten off the bus, and we were standing on an observation deck that was well below where the cliff divers would dive from. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a man who looked familiar. He hadn't been on our bus, but someone I thought I had seen before. I just couldn't place him. I shrugged it off. They said that everyone had their doppelganger. I don't think I've ever seen water that blue, Helen said. People were taking pictures when Inez started talking. All right, who are my brave souls? If you're going to partake in the cliff diving experience, please follow me. She walked over to the side, and several people followed her, more than I expected. And there were several women in the group. I gave them a lot of credit. They were much braver than me. There's still time to join, Helen said to me teasingly. We had already talked about this on the way up, saying there was no way we were jumping off a cliff into water with who knows what in it below. I like to try new things, I do, but this is something I think I would rather watch. Helen laughed. I'm right there with you. It looks like there's a trail that leads a bit farther up to the cliff, she said, pointing to a sign. Do you want to go up farther so we can get a better view of the crazy people jumping? I would love that. I don't want to do it myself, but I can admire those who are, and would love a great vantage point to watch. The path wasn't much over 12 inches wide, and it was very rocky. I wasn't scared of heights, and we weren't close to the cliff's edge, but the lack of a guardrail made me a little nervous. Helen was ahead of me and slowed down just a little. Are you okay? I asked. I'm fine. I guess I'm just uneasy that we're like 4 feet away from the edge of the cliff. It's a long way down. I was just thinking that. It is a little nerve-wracking, but just keep putting one foot in front of the other. I can see our destination, and there is a rail around the observation deck. Thank goodness for the small things, right? She said. We kept walking, and suddenly I felt someone push me from behind, and I lost my balance, falling to my knees just to the right of the path, which got me closer to the edge of the cliff. I was on all fours, literally inches from the side. I gasped, and Helen stopped and turned around. Are you okay? She said, rushing back to help me up. I was shaking, thinking about how close I was to falling off the cliff. Did you trip? No. Someone pushed me. I watched as she looked behind us and there was no one, but she was gracious enough not to say anything. Maybe I wasn't pushed. Maybe it was the fear talking, but even as I said it, I knew that wasn't true. I had distinctly felt hands on my back. Someone tried to push me off the cliff. Chapter 14. Are you sure you're okay? Helen asked me as we got back on the bus. After what I like to call my near-death experience, which was an exaggeration, I wasn't saying it to anyone, just mentally to myself so no one would think I was crazy. I was shaken up and my heart was still racing. I had told Helen I was fine, and we finished making our way up to the observation deck where I did enjoy watching the cliff divers. I just knew I hadn't tripped, and that made me that much more nervous on the way down. While the scenery absolutely blew me away, getting back on the bus instantly relaxed me. I felt a lot safer on the bus, and at least I could still see the scenery out the windows. I'm fine. I'm glad I got to see all this. It's absolutely gorgeous here. It's beautiful at the resort, but this is more natural, if that makes sense, I said. Helen had been worried about me since the moment I tripped, and I just wanted to reassure her I was fine. The last thing I wanted was to have her worry. I agree with that. Absolutely gorgeous. I still have no desire to cliff dive, but it was beautiful to watch. Helen and I didn't talk much on the way back to the resort. In fact, the entire bus was quiet. We had made all the stops on the way to the cliffs and were driving straight back to the resort, which made me happy. I was tired, even more so because of what had happened. The adrenaline was ebbing away and exhaustion was taking its place. I was too wound up to sleep like some of my busmates, as evidenced by the snoring going on, and I didn't feel like reading my book, though I did lean back with my eyes closed. The slowing of the bus to a stop woke me up, and I saw we were back at the resort. I looked over, and Helen was opening her eyes too. She smiled at me. I didn't expect to fall asleep, but I think I got a good little nap in, she said. Me too. You have my number, so let's get together for coffee or something before we leave, or maybe we'll see each other on another excursion. I want to do that dinner cruise that's in a couple of days. That sounds like a fun thing to do. I'll check it out. We got off the bus and said our goodbyes, and I headed into the lobby. As I walked over to the elevators, I saw Belinda standing in front of the elevator bank. Belinda, I called out. Belinda! She turned and saw me, and at first she didn't seem happy. But then she smiled. Trixie, how wonderful to see you, she said, and I couldn't help but think if it was wonderful to see me, why hadn't she returned my calls? Then I instantly felt bad. She had just lost her sister. I could cut her some slack. How are you doing? I asked. I'm hanging in there, just trying to get everything handled to take Bessie back home. I tried to call you a few times just to check in on you and see if there's anything I can do, I said. I know. I'm sorry that I haven't returned your calls. I haven't been in the mood to talk to anyone. Oh, totally fine. I understand. The elevator door opened and we went to walk in. Shoot, I forgot to grab something. Enjoy your evening and I'll talk to you later, she said. As the elevator doors closed, I watched her walk away. I hit the button for my floor and thought about how weird that interaction was. Belinda seemed very uncomfortable talking to me, which made little sense. But then she was grieving, so I probably shouldn't read too much into it. I was still shaking my head at Belinda's reaction as I exited the elevator and thought maybe she didn't want my help anymore, though I couldn't forget that someone had slipped a letter by my door warning me off and someone had tried to push me off the cliff today. There was a reason those two things happened. Was Belinda's behavior off because someone was threatening her too? I wanted to ask, but I didn't think calling her now was the right time, and as my mother would tell me, timing is everything. I opened the door to my room and walked in, not having any more time to think about Belinda because my phone rang. Opening the zipper to my purse, I reached in and pulled out my phone. "Hey, Cora, you won't believe what I did today," I said when I answered and told her about watching the cliff divers. I left out the part about someone trying to push me off the cliff because I didn't want her to worry, and there was a possibility that I had been wrong. "That sounds amazing. I am so jealous. I hope you took a lot of pictures because I can't wait to see, but listen, I called you about that machine you sent pictures of." "Really? What about it?" "I found out what it is, and you're right that it's a printer, but it's a special kind of printer." "What do you mean, a special kind of printer?" "A very expensive, exclusive printer that is used for very intricate work, not like your average copy machine at the office." "What is it used to print?" "Artwork. It's a printer that can scan in artwork and reproduce prints of high quality that people would then buy to hang in their house or something." "Like forgeries?" "Well, technically for licensed reproductions, but as I was researching, yes, this printer has been used in some forgery cases." "What would stop anyone from buying this printer and making copies of artwork to sell, even if they didn't have the right licenses? I mean, besides it being illegal. The manufacturer of the printer can't just sell it to anyone. The research I did showed there is a lengthy process to buying one, and that you have to disclose what you're going to use it for and that you have the proper permissions to use it. Plus, you can't sell it without proper documentation." Something told me that the printer's owner probably didn't follow the proper ownership process, or it wouldn't be in an abandoned house. "What you're saying is it's a very controlled piece of equipment and the chances of one just randomly lying around are slim." "That's exactly what I'm saying. I'm not sure this is something that you should involve yourself in." "Trixie, I'm worried," Cora said. I was glad I hadn't told her what happened on my trip today, or she really would be worried. "You think someone is making reprints without permission from the artist and selling them?" I asked her. "It can be used for other things too. I mean, you can print anything on it. It's just used for printing jobs that require a more intricate level of detail." I heard a knock at the door and I walked over, looking through the peephole. It was Javier. "Thanks, Cora. I really appreciate you finding this information out for me, but someone's at the door. I need to go." "All right, but I meant what I said. Be careful." "I will," I said, hanging up and opening the door, ushering Javier in. "Did you have a nice time up at the cliffs?" he asked. "It was beautiful. Breathtaking. You were spot on with your description, and I am so glad I went." "Why do I sense there's a but in here somewhere?" he said, looking concerned. "Because I think someone tried to push me off the cliff today." A look of shock crossed his face, and I waited for him to recover before I told him what happened and then what Cora had said about the printer. "Trixie, I think we should probably leave well enough alone. The note and then this today. Someone must be trying to stop you from finding Bessie's killer, and it's not worth it. In fact, we should go to the police. If someone is trying to stop me, then we must be closer to figuring out who did it than we think. We don't even know what she was involved in." "Well, after what your friend Cora said, we can know it was probably illegal, and illegal things get people killed." I sat there thinking, and then it occurred to me, the gentleman I thought I had seen before at the observation deck, I had seen him at the peg leg. He had been the gentleman in the corner. Was that just a coincidence, or was he following me? Chapter 15. The one thing I wasn't getting on this trip was a lot of sleep. I woke up in the morning the same way I had the last few mornings, tired and bleary-eyed. There were too many things running through my head at night to rest. I didn't disagree with Javier's thoughts that we should stop what we were doing and I should enjoy the rest of my vacation, but I felt I was too far in now. The same thing that had fueled me to go back into Bessie's room and look at her emails was what was fueling me now. The anger that someone was trying to scare me into giving up the pursuit of justice. Honestly, I wasn't exactly sure where this stance came from because yesterday had scared me, but I refused to be bullied. The aroma of coffee was in the air because I had set the timer last night, but I didn't feel like having coffee on my balcony. I wanted to be around people, even if they were people I didn't know. So I got dressed and headed down to the cafe. When I walked up to the hostess stand and looked around while waiting for her to come back from seating someone, I spotted Belinda and gave myself a mental pat on the back for deciding to come down this morning. I wanted to talk to her, and I didn't want to give her the chance to blow me off. I headed over to her table. "Do you mind if I sit with you?" "Of course not. In fact, it will be nice to have coffee with someone." She certainly had a change of attitude from yesterday. This was a good sign, I thought, as Sylvia came over to take my order. "Do you work every morning?" I asked. "Not 7 days a week, but pretty close." "Your usual?" she said, and I couldn't help but smile. "I love how you call it my usual, even though this is only my 3rd time here." I try to remember what guests order. I don't want them to think of this as just eating at a restaurant, but rather dining with family. "Well, you're definitely hitting the mark on that one, and yes, I will take my usual." She walked away, and Belinda looked at me. "What's your usual?" I'm intrigued. I told her, and when Sylvia came back with my drink, Belinda ordered one for herself before looking back at me and speaking. "I feel I owe you an apology." "Whatever for?" I asked. "I was short with you last night at the elevators. There is so much going on that I don't know whether I'm coming or going, and I was very impolite." "Don't even worry about it. I know you have a lot going on. It's understandable. Are you making headway with getting Bessie's body home?" "Not really. So much red tape since we're outside the United States. I don't know why I thought it might be easy." "One can always hope. I only met Bessie that one time." "Do you mind if I ask you a question? What was she like? What were her hobbies?" I thought it might be helpful for Belinda to talk about her sister, but I also thought I might get some information about Bessie that could clue me into why she had an interest in a printing machine that printed copies of famous artwork. "She worked a lot. We were close, but I didn't know every single detail of her life. For instance, she was tight-lipped about her dating life, even though she was encouraging me to get out more. She loved getting other people together, but not so much talking about herself." "Was she an artist?" "No. Why would you ask that?" I thought she mentioned art, but I may have misheard. Belinda's coffee came, and we chatted for another 30 minutes, where she told me about her and Bessie's childhood. A few times she about broke down in tears, and I felt bad for asking her to talk about Bessie in the first place, but when we got up to leave, she thanked me. "I appreciate you letting me go on and on about my sister. It feels good to talk about her." "Of course. I hate to even ask this, but have the police made any progress?" I said. "I don't know. They haven't called and told me anything. I just want to put all this behind me. It's just too hard." "I understand." And I did. When we parted ways, we made tentative plans to get together again before she left. I never mentioned the note or the incident at the cliff. Belinda had too much stress on her already, and I didn't see the need to mention it. I was heading back to my room thinking about changing my shoes and going for a walk on the beach when my phone rang. It was Javier. "I just had coffee with Belinda," I said after answering and saying hello. "I can't wait to hear what she has to say." "Where are you now?" he said, and I could hear excitement in his voice. "I'm on my way back to my room to change my shoes and go for a walk." "Why, what's going on?" "I talked to my aunt, and I have some news." "I'll meet you in your room." I don't know where Javier was when he called me, but when I got to my room, the door was already open, and I could see he was in there and had already fixed us drinks. "I know you just had coffee, but I thought you might want a Diet Coke," he said, bringing 2 glasses over to the sitting area and putting them on the table. "This must be serious if you fixed me a drink." "I talked to my aunt today about Maria Alvarez." I took a sip of my Diet Coke and set it back down on the table. "I take it she had something interesting to say?" I asked her what kind of business Maria was in. I thought maybe that would give us a clue what they used that printer for. And she said Maria had a reputation for smuggling." "Smuggling in paintings?" I offered up. "No, smuggling as in people." Javier paused and let that sink in a bit. Forging paintings was one thing, but smuggling people? Well, that was quite another. "And she's sure? Smuggling people is, I don't know. No wonder she's so feared." It was just hard for me to wrap my brain around a female being involved in human trafficking. "I can't say she's sure, as in has proof. No one has proof, but my aunt is rarely wrong. She wouldn't repeat the information if she weren't pretty sure it was true." I tried to ask her what kind of smuggling, and she said all she knew was it had to do with people. Bessie came here because someone was threatening her. Someone on the beach gave her the paper with the address and then killed her. Or she already had the paper and was killed. We could be completely off base, and the two are completely unrelated, and the killing was random, though I don't believe much in coincidences. The printer in the abandoned house is known for printing copies of famous paintings. But Belinda said Bessie wasn't into art. That still doesn't take care of the matter of blackmail. Someone had something on Bessie to get her here in the first place. If we count out Maria, then we are kind of back to square one. This was beyond frustrating. After my coffee with Belinda and talking to her about Bessie, I wanted to help bring her closure. The threatening letter came after you talked to Pete Aiden, but the attempt on your life didn't come until after we went to the peg leg, Javier said. Then there is that guy that we saw at the peg leg, and then I saw him again at the cliff observation deck before someone tried to push me off. Maybe he's involved. I think we should go back to the peg leg. Are you crazy? Did you not hear what I told you that my aunt said? I think we should stay far away from anywhere Maria Alvarez might be, Javier said, shaking his head vehemently. I'm not saying we try to find Maria, but I'd like to see if that guy is hanging around. Try and talk to him. I know it's a long shot, but we could get lucky. If you're sure? The things my aunt told me about Maria Alvarez, I can tell you right now that's not something I want either of us to get mixed up in. I completely understand. If we see Maria and her entourage there, we can leave. Okay. Give me a minute to go sign out a car, and I will meet you in front of the resort. Javier left, and I didn't have a reason to change. So a few minutes later, I headed downstairs. I peeked outside and didn't see Javier out there yet, so I walked over to where the resort had urns of water infused with cucumber and filled up a cup. As I stepped out of the way from someone behind me, I looked over and spotted Belinda engaged in what looked to be a heated conversation with Pete Aiden. I could see maybe if Belinda had found out her sister had talked to Pete, she might want to have a conversation with him, but what on earth were they arguing about? I walked in that direction, figuring I would just butt in and ask when Belinda stormed off. Pete watched her go and then looked back around and saw me. We locked eyes for a second and he smiled, then he turned and walked away. I looked over and saw Javier had just pulled up. I made a mental note to find Pete later and see what that was all about. Chapter 16. I'm still not sure this is a good idea, Javier said as we headed to the peg leg. I was only half paying attention because I couldn't get the image of Belinda and Pete out of my mind. What on earth were they arguing about? You realize when we went there the last time, we weren't the only people eating, and the food was good. All we are doing is going back to eat. How is that not making me feel better? I'm not sure. Even if we saw Maria, it doesn't really seem like she and Bessie were into the same thing, so we have nothing to fear from her. Then why are we going there? Because I want to try another shrimp dish, I teased, and he just shook his head. We made it to the pier, and I asked Javier to park a little down from the restaurant because I wanted to enjoy the beautiful sunny day. Walking farther down the pier would allow me to do that and see the different shops and other restaurants that were around. I still had several days left on my vacation, and I wanted to enjoy them since this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I wasn't even exaggerating. Being a single mother saving for my son's college and a business owner didn't always make for a lot of extras. Javier did as I asked, and we enjoyed a pleasant stroll down the pier. I even stopped at a couple of shops and bought a few things to take home. One store had a beautiful selection of handmade bookmarks, and I talked to the proprietor for a few minutes about my store back home, thinking there might be a relationship here. I knew that our patrons at the Red Wine Bookstore would die over these beautiful watercolor painting bookmarks, and even more so because they were from another country and handmade. We were almost to the peg leg, and I could smell the rich aroma of coffee and looked over in the direction to see a cute cafe. We might have to get a latte for dessert, Javier. The smell coming from that place is amazing. I'm not a big coffee drinker, but as I remember, there's something special about the beans from that place, so yes, probably a good place to check out while we are on this side of town. I stopped so I could read the menu board outside the cafe. Of course, I wanted to be prepared and know what I could look forward to for dessert. Javier, I said, grabbing his arm. What? Is something wrong? Look, I said, wanting to point but not be obvious, so I just nudged my head in the direction I wanted him to look. I'm not sure I'm following. Look through the left window. There's a long table, and that guy that we saw at the peg leg last time and who I saw at one of the observation decks at the cliffs, he's in there. Javier peered in the window, and it took a second, but he finally saw what I saw. However, at the same time, Javier noticed him. The guy noticed us. If I hadn't already thought there was something sketchy about him, the fact that he grabbed his things and shoved them in a bag and practically ran toward the back would have told me he didn't want to talk to us. Come on, I said, grabbing Javier's arm again and pulling him toward the alley next to the coffee shop. There was no way I was going to just let this guy get away. Luckily, Javier must have agreed with me because he came willingly and made me practically run down the alley. The guy had gotten a head start, but we could still see him in front of us. He wasn't running, but he was walking quickly, and we slowed our pace, hoping that he wouldn't look behind and see us. We went on this way for a block or so. I was huffing and puffing, not used to this much exertion, and realized we couldn't just follow him forever. What should we do? I asked Javier. I've got an idea. You keep following him, and I'm going to cut over and speed up and try to get ahead of him. Maybe then we can trap him and get him to talk to us. Though it seemed a little scary to trap someone, he might have been the person who tried to push me off the cliff, and I wanted him to answer for that. I nodded my head in agreement, and Javier took off to the right so he could head down to the next alley. I kept up my pace, trying to focus on the guy ahead of me and not my labored breathing, and it seemed to work. Although the guy was also slowing down, he hadn't looked behind him once, which was good for us, though it seemed a little overconfident on his part if he were trying to escape. Suddenly, I saw Javier up ahead in front of the guy, and it only took a couple of seconds before the guy did too. He did a casual turnaround, and then he saw me. For a second, I thought he was going to bolt. He could have run into one of the other shops and hoped they had a back door, but he didn't. He stopped and let us approach him. We can't talk here, he said when we got in earshot, before either Javier or I could say anything. Then where? I said, not about to let him get away without an explanation, now that we were face to face with him. He didn't seem so scary close up. Follow me, he said, and turned to brush past Javier and headed in the opposite direction, again without looking to see if we were following. I looked at Javier and shrugged. We didn't have a choice. If we wanted information, we needed to be agreeable, so he would talk. He walked down the block and then turned left into an alley, going down a few buildings until he stopped and walked to a building on his right, opening the door. Then he looked back at us. This is where I live. He walked in and we followed him. I admit I was more than a little nervous about walking into a stranger's place, especially a stranger who may have tried to harm me, but since Javier was with me, it was 2 against 1. That made me feel better, though poor Javier needed a raise. After we walked in the building, we walked up a flight of stairs and stopped in front of the door. The guy put his hands in his pockets and pulled out keys, unlocking it and walking in, motioning for us to follow. Have a seat, he said, motioning to a clean but threadbare couch. No thanks. We'll stand, I said. I didn't want to get too comfortable just in case. He shrugged. Suit yourself. Why are you following us? I asked, and his eyes shot open. I'm not following you guys. You were at the peg leg the first time we were there. I saw you at the cliffs, and someone tried to kill me at the cliffs. I'm thinking it was you, I said in a burst. Javier looked at me, a little surprised. Probably because my manner was a little more aggressive than he had seen before. Hey, wait a minute. I did nothing to you, and it's not you I'm following, he said defensively. That stopped me in my proverbial tracks. Who are you following? Would you guys please sit down? I promise I'm not going to hurt you, and you standing there is making me nervous. I exchanged glances with Javier and shrugged. The guy didn't seem threatening, so we took a seat. If you weren't following me, why were you at the cliffs? And if you didn't try to kill me, who did? I started in again. I should probably start from the beginning, but this conversation can't go further than here. I don't think we can commit to that until we know what you have to say, I said, not having it in me to be blindly trusting after everything that happened. He nodded. Fair enough. My name is Colin Reed, and I'm an investigative journalist. I'm here doing a piece on Maria Alvarez. That left both Javier and me speechless for a moment. What do you mean? On her human trafficking? Now it was his turn to look surprised. You know? Yes, I said, even though we didn't know much. If that's true, why were you at the cliffs when I was there? I was looking for Maria's American contact. And you thought that was me? I'm not sure who it is yet. Just, it's an American. I was trying to get a look at some of the Americans staying at the resort, and I had heard that there were 4 of them on an excursion. How did you hear that? Javier asked. It was someone at the hotel, but I don't want to get anyone in trouble. I'm just trying to get information to bring Maria Alvarez to justice. Do you know that one of the resort customers was murdered a couple of days ago and she was American? I said. I heard. Could that have been Maria's contact? Could Maria have killed Bessie? It could have been. But obviously, I can't talk to her, so I'm trying to rule out everyone else by process of elimination. Why were you hanging out at the peg leg the other night? Wouldn't that bring unnecessary attention to you? No, Maria doesn't really pay attention to patrons at a restaurant, and I look like any other tourist. That he did. And while I wanted to trust him, I knew we needed to be careful. I didn't want to end up like Bessie. Chapter 17. I was back in my room a while later after the conversation with Colin, still on the fence about whether or not he was telling the truth. My gut told me he was, but I wanted to be careful and not just blindly believe him. Even though it seemed like Colin was on our side. Well, kind of on our side in the sense that he was trying to find out the truth about Maria's operations. I still wanted to be careful. While at Colin's, we had told him what we knew about Maria, that we thought maybe Bessie was somehow connected with her from a business standpoint, and that's how she ended up dead. Colin agreed with Javier's aunt, who said she had also never heard of Maria Alvarez dealing in artwork, and smuggling humans seemed to be her thing. However, he did finally admit that it wasn't completely impossible that Bessie was somehow involved with Maria because he had heard Maria was branching out into other business endeavors. He just didn't know what those were. I gave Belinda a call, hoping that she might know if Bessie ever mentioned a Maria Alvarez, but I got her voicemail. Hopefully, I could catch her later. I still needed to talk to her about Pete. Speaking of Pete, I also decided to try to talk to him again. I knew he typically had a pre-dinner drink at the bar and decided to get ready and go find him. Based on our last interaction, I didn't think he would mind. I had brought one fancy dress, which I had on now since the bar lounge was a bit dressy. It was the same dress I had worn last time, but I didn't really care if he noticed. It's not like I was trying to impress him or anything. I got down to the lounge and saw him sitting at a table by himself. I guessed I should be thankful that as friendly as he was, he didn't already have someone at his table. That would have been awkward. "May I join you?" I said, reaching his table. "Of course." He lifted his hand up to get the waitress's attention, who walked right over. "Yes, Mr. Aiden," she said. "Can you bring the lady—" He looked at me and raised an eyebrow. "Can I just get a wine spritzer?" I felt like something refreshing, but not anything too alcoholic. "Of course, I'll be right back," she said. "So how have you been since we last spoke?" he asked. "I've been good, enjoying all the beautiful sights that Belize has to offer." "Have you been to the cliffs?" "Not this trip, but I have been before. Absolutely breathtaking." "I know. I went yesterday and was blown away," I said. "Did you go cliff diving?" I couldn't help but laugh, and Pete smiled. "I take that as a no," he said. "That's a hard no. It was fun to watch, but there's no way you'd catch me up there jumping into water I can't see below." "That, my dear, is something we can both agree on," he said, and the waitress dropped off my drink. I took a sip, and it was every bit as refreshing as I'd hoped. "So how do you know Belinda Trent?" There was no reason to beat around the bush. If Pete was at all surprised by my question, he didn't reveal it. "I actually don't know her." Let me rephrase that. I don't know her well. It was her sister I was friends with. "Bessie?" I tried not to act too excited. This was the information I wanted to get from him originally. I guess I should have just come right out and asked. "Yes." "Did you know her?" "Sad thing that happened." "I didn't know her well. How did you know her?" "We did business together back in California," he said. "In the art field?" "Yes. We were both, I don't know what you would call it, amateur aficionados." "Do you collect art?" "Some, but most of what I collect are reprints." Now we were getting somewhere. If Bessie had been involved in forging reprints, maybe Pete was also involved. I needed to be careful with what I said next. "Is that what you were talking to her sister about? Collecting?" "Heavens, no. I don't think she cares much about the arts." "What makes you say that?" "She accused me of stealing one of her sister's prints. I tried to tell her I didn't need to steal from her sister because I already had the same print and the prints weren't valuable." Belinda didn't seem to believe me, and I really didn't want to argue. She just lost her sister, but I couldn't give her something I didn't have. "What made her think you might have it?" "I'm not really sure. She said something that her sister told her about our friendship, and maybe her sister told her about this one reprint we were trying to get our hands on. That's another reason I came on this trip, because it's a local artist." "Are you trying to get him to make a copy of a painting for you?" I thought Belinda had told me her sister wasn't into art. Why would she say that when it wasn't true? Or did she just not know her sister that well? "No, I wanted to get him to allow us to license the artwork in order to make copies." "Did you know Bessie was coming here?" "I did. When she found out I was coming down here for business and was going to talk to the artist, she decided to join me. We both thought two people might be more convincing than one, but she didn't get the chance to go with me." I couldn't help but wonder why he hadn't mentioned Bessie before. He seemed so open, I found it odd and couldn't help but wonder if he was hiding something. "Why didn't you tell me you knew Bessie before?" "When we had lunch and I brought her up," I asked. Pete didn't show a bit of surprise when I asked that either. It was kind of impressive for someone like me who tended to wear my emotions on my face for everyone to see. "She asked me not to mention she was here." "Really? Why? And why tell me now? She didn't say, and when a woman asks me a question, I do my best to oblige. As for why now, she's dead and you seem trustworthy, so I can't see the harm. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I didn't. I felt he was being honest, and I couldn't fault his logic. Pete and I chatted for a little while longer until it was time for his dinner reservation. Would you like to have dinner with me? He asked. Can I take a rain check? I promised my son I would call him, and I have a short window between school, sports, dinner, and everything else going on. Of course, family always comes first. Pete was a nice guy, I thought, as I headed back to my room. I did have plans to call Cody, so I hadn't been lying, but I also wanted to have some time to think about what Pete had told me. Nothing really made sense. I saw Belinda as I walked across the foyer. From the direction she was coming, I figured she might have been grabbing a bite to eat in the lounge. Belinda? Belinda! I called out and hurried my walk over to her. It took her a second to realize who was calling her name, and she broke out in a smile. Trixie, how lovely to see you. I got your message from earlier. I was actually heading back to my room to catch up on a few things and was going to call you. I didn't call for anything important, just to check in on you. That's so sweet. I'm doing okay. How about you? I thought that was a bit of an odd question. I'm enjoying my time here, but who wouldn't? It is a tropical paradise. That is true. I did get to relax all day on the beach today. There's something to be said for sunshine being soothing for the soul. I was confused for a second because I had seen her before Javier and I went to the peg leg. That had been well after breakfast. But I wasn't trying to confront her and call her a liar. I wanted to ask her about Pete, though. This might sound like a crazy question, but do you know Pete Aiden? I think he was a friend of your sister's. Belinda seemed to take a second to think about it. The name sounds a little familiar, so maybe Bessie mentioned him in passing. Interesting. Not only did Belinda lie about being outside on the beach all day, but she also acted like she didn't know Pete, and I knew for sure my eyes hadn't been playing tricks on me. So why was she lying? Chapter 18. I told you yesterday this was a bad idea, and I haven't changed my mind since then, Javier said as we were sitting on the balcony in my room having coffee. When I had called him this morning to come talk about what I was thinking after yesterday, I had to twist his arm to have coffee with me. He said he wanted to be respectful, that I was a guest. I'll admit, he did a good job of being friendly while also keeping a professional distance. Had this just been a typical vacation, I admit I probably wouldn't be as friendly, because I would be focused on vacationing, but Javier and I were in this plight to find out who killed Bessie together, and that blurred the lines between vacationer and butler. We need to talk to Colin again. I still think there's something off about that guy, Javier said. I did some online searching last night, and he is who he says he is. His name is real matches his picture, and he is an investigative journalist. Was there anything about him doing a piece on Maria Alvarez? No, but if he's investigating, I would imagine he would want to keep that quiet, I said with a pointed look at Javier. I read some of his other investigative pieces were of the same nature, so there's nothing that tells me he wasn't being honest. Okay, why return to the peg leg and talk to Maria this time if you trust what he told us? He said he had never heard of her dealing in artwork, because maybe he doesn't know everything, and what other leads do we have? You said that Pete mentioned he and Bessie had worked together before in the art world? Maybe she double-crossed him or something and he got angry. I think he's a pretty unflappable businessman, but I'm pretty sure he was sincere when he talked to me about Bessie and explained why he didn't admit to knowing her when we had lunch. I don't think he had anything to do with her death, I said. Maybe we should go back to that house and get a closer look at what might be in there besides the printer we saw through the window. I thought about that for a second, and Javier had a point. You might be onto something. It's daytime. Maybe there would be people there. Why do you sound so excited about that? Do you really want to run into any people who might be there because they could have killed Bessie? I'm not saying we rush in there and do a citizen's arrest, but it could be information we could take to the police, I said. Don't you think criminals prefer to do business at night, Javier said. Why are you arguing about this? It was your idea, and maybe they don't feel they have anything to worry about. It's not like they had curtains on the windows. That's true. That neighborhood is very much a mind-your-own-business neighborhood. Then let's go. We can check out the house, go to the peg leg after, and I will treat you to lunch. I stood up, grabbing my coffee cup, and headed back into the room. I rinsed my cup out in the sink and set it on the sideboard. Javier followed suit and we headed downstairs. You can wait here, and I will pull the car around, he said. I can go with you. Unless it's against the rules, I could use the walk. Sure, that's fine. Whatever the guest wants, the guest gets. The car compound is not far. We walked down a block from the resort into a parking garage that was a pretty decent size and got into the elevator. Javier hit the button for the 3rd floor, which was the top. We keep all the fleet vehicles on the top. Employees who drive to work park on the 2nd floor and our guests on the 1st, but it's all valet. You mean if someone wanted to, they couldn't park their own car? Have you seen the people you're here at the resort with? I don't think most of them ever park their own car. Javier looked at me and laughed. I laughed with him because he was right. The resort represented a lifestyle beyond my usual experience. Javier signed out a car, and it wasn't long before we were turning onto 3rd Avenue. I would do the same thing we did before, drive past it, park on a side street, and go in the back way. Last time it was dark. This time it's light out. Do you think we should go through people's backyards? Don't worry. Even in a neighborhood like this, people keep to themselves. No one will pay attention to us. I trusted him since he lived here, but I knew if I saw 2 people traipsing through my backyard, I would wonder what the heck they were doing and probably call the cops. We parked and got out of the car, and that's when the nerves took over. Maybe this wasn't a good idea. Javier noticed my hesitation. Are you changing your mind? Yes. No, I don't know. We've come this far. Let's just go up to the house. We can peek in the windows again. If we notice anything off, then we will leave. I nodded. Sounds like a plan, even though I still think it's weird that we're cutting through people's backyards. He just smiled and started walking, and I followed him closely. At least he was right about one thing. No one even looked at us twice, and there were a couple of people outside. We finally reached our destination, and Javier stopped. There aren't any cars in the driveway. They could have parked on the street or a couple of blocks away like we did if they didn't want anyone to know they were here. Come on, let's go over to the window we looked into last time. I still can't believe you think this is less scary than going to the peg leg, I grumbled, but followed him anyway. We got to the window and peered in. The printers were still there. If whatever Bessie was involved in had to do with the printers, and those people had tried to scare me away, they obviously weren't too worried that I would come back to the house if they even knew I had been there. It doesn't look like anyone's there, Javier whispered. Should we go in? I didn't want to, but I knew my curiosity would drive me crazy if I didn't, so I nodded. We left the window and walked to the back door. Javier turned the knob. It was locked. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Well, I guess we can't get in, I said. You give in too quickly. Just give a guy a second. Javier pulled out what looked like a Swiss Army knife from his pocket and selected a tool that looked like a tiny screwdriver. He inserted it into the lock and started moving it around. Are you a burglar on your days off? I asked. No, but I have lost my house keys more times than you can imagine. When I was a kid, my mom quit giving me new ones. She said I could just wait until someone got home if I couldn't be responsible. So you taught yourself how to break in? Javier looked over his shoulder and grinned. Yeah, my mom wasn't thrilled, but hey, I didn't need a house key. He grinned. He stepped in and looked around, motioning for me to follow him. I closed the door, but not all the way, just in case we had to make a fast exit. The door we came in led to a kitchen that had a few to-go containers sitting on the counter. I tapped Javier on the shoulder, not wanting to talk, and pointed to the containers. The top had the stamp of the peg leg. Either the people working here liked the restaurant or Maria was involved. The house was quiet, too quiet for anyone to be here, which was a relief, but my heart was still going a mile a minute. I wasn't suited for breaking and entering. We walked into the room where the printers were, and on the table, which wasn't visible from the window, were stacks of boxes. I went to the boxes, opened one, and was shocked by what I saw, while Javier walked around the room. Javier, these are passports. Blank passports. Do you think that's what they're forging here? Passports, not reprints of artwork? Before he could answer, I heard the creak of the back door open. Someone was here. Panicked, I looked at Javier. By the look on his face, he had heard the noise too. He pointed to the front door, and I nodded. We stepped in that direction, not wanting to clue anyone in that we were there. But the front door opened, and in walked a man I recognized from being around Maria Alvarez at the peg leg. I knew we were in trouble. Chapter 19. When we saw the man at the front door, we spun around, and behind us was Belinda with a gentleman I didn't recognize. The situation confused me. Belinda, what are you doing here? She gave a derisive laugh. Oh, Trixie, you tried so hard to be helpful. If only you hadn't tried so hard, maybe you wouldn't be in this position. What do you mean? I asked. Trixie, are you really that obtuse? If I weren't staring at Belinda with my own eyes, I wouldn't think it was her. The venomous tone of her voice threw me, but I wasn't as obtuse as she mentioned, and the pieces were starting to fall into place. You killed Bessie, I said slowly. Not directly. What kind of monster do you take me for? She tossed her head. Why? Did you find out she was making fake passports? I assume that's what you're doing here? Bessie wasn't making fake passports. She wasn't that smart. I take that back. She was that smart. Bessie just didn't want to get her hands dirty with something illegal. I told her she could make 10 times the amount of money with half the effort by forging passports instead of those stupid pieces of artwork she was so obsessed with. I don't understand. She told me she treated you to this trip because your husband had recently died. She planned on coming on this trip anyway because she wanted to meet some local artist who paints the most ridiculous paintings. Bessie and that Aiden guy felt licensing the prints and selling them back in the US would make them a tidy profit. But my sister did invite me to help me get over my dead husband. The Belinda in front of me didn't seem at all like the grieving sister I'd seen previously. Did you set this up here once you realized you were coming to Belize? I did. I had already been looking for someplace outside the United States to set up operations, and after Bessie planned this trip, I did some checking around. It's low-key here, and people mind their own business. If only Bessie would have minded her own business. She found out what you were doing here? You said you tried to get her to print passports instead of artwork, so didn't she already know what you were doing, I asked? She thought I stopped. Then how did she find out you had started up again, I asked. You're certainly a nosy thing. But I guess there's no harm in telling you, Belinda said. Those words sent a chill down my spine, and I wasn't the only one. I glanced at Javier and could see his eyes widen. If she didn't have a problem telling us everything that happened, I knew she didn't expect us to leave here alive. Maybe if I kept her talking long enough, someone from the hotel would notice how Javier and I hadn't come back yet and would come looking for us. When Javier had signed out the car, he had to put down a time frame, and he said all the cars had GPS trackers. It was a long shot, but I wasn't going to lose hope. Please tell me. I want to know what was so important about this business you had to kill your sister over it. My tone was a little antagonistic, but I was trying not to show how scared I was. Belinda paused and looked me over as if she were trying to assess something. I just didn't know what. Technology is great, except when it's not. You know how when you're texting, and you can be texting someone a message, and someone else sends you a text, and somehow that message goes to the new person instead of the person you intended for. She looked at me, waiting for an answer. I've had that happen before. Yes. It's frustrating, I said, wondering exactly what that had to do with anything. Well, that's what happened. I was texting my contact about the delivery of these machines, and it accidentally went to her. She knew exactly what I was up to, but she thought she was more clever than me. As the older sister, she always wanted to protect me, even, as she often said, if it was from me. So she tried to stop the delivery or something? Did she know before you arrived? I'm assuming she did because someone killed Bessie before Belinda's expected arrival, though perhaps Belinda also lied about that. Something like that. Listen, this conversation is boring me, she said, and the man standing next to her took a menacing step forward. I fought the urge to retreat, determined not to let them intimidate me. I didn't even want to think about the thug behind us. We won't say anything, I started, and she interrupted me. I know you won't say anything. I'm not about to allow you to mess up a good thing here. Then at least answer a few more questions, I said, and she gave a loud sigh, rolling her eyes. Okay, fine. A couple more questions, and then that's it. If Bessie knew about your operation, then why did she die with the address of this place in her hand? She was meeting someone on the beach, and it sure sounded like someone was blackmailing her. Were you behind that? Belinda tilted her head and looked at me as if she was a little surprised by what I was saying. Maybe I had more information than she thought I had. I think you must have your stories mixed up. No one was blackmailing Bessie. For one, she would have done nothing to be blackmailed for. The girl was as vanilla as they came, but if she had, she would have told me. We didn't keep secrets from each other. That was another lie of several Belinda had told me since meeting her. I wondered if it even occurred to her. She just said she and her sister didn't keep secrets from each other, yet she had tried to keep this huge secret from Bessie. Then had her killed when she found out. Someone told her to meet them on the beach. I assumed whoever that was had killed her. When I found her body, the address to this place had fallen out of her hand. I couldn't believe how callous Belinda was being. It was like we were talking about a stranger. I was just about to ask another question when a knock came at the door, and everyone froze. "Mark, get rid of whoever that is at the door," she said to the man by the front door, who I recognized from being with Maria at the peg leg. So much for Colin and Javier's aunt saying Maria only dealt in trafficking. I wanted to turn around and see if I could glimpse who was at the door, but I didn't want my back to Belinda. I could hear the front door open, but I didn't hear Mark say anything. The door closed. "No one was there," he said in a flat voice. Before Belinda could comment, I heard a crash and footsteps right before 3 men in police uniforms with guns drawn walked into the room. "Hands up and on the ground," one of them screamed in a tone I wasn't about to argue with. Javier and I dropped to the ground as directed. It took 2 more shouts before Belinda and the 2 men followed suit. I could hear the police doing something, but I kept my head down, not wanting to chance it, and lifted up to look. "Are you okay?" came a familiar voice, and I looked up to see Colin. "What are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that question, but first, are you okay?" "I'm fine. Can I get up now?" Colin chuckled. "Yes, you guys can get up now, and then I think you will need to go with the police for a ride to the station." Chapter 20. "I can't believe I only have a couple more days here in paradise," I said the next day, as I was on the beach enjoying the sun. "Me either. I don't know how I'm going to go back to being a butler for an average resort goer after you," Javier said. He was lying out on the lounge chair next to me. I told him that since he was my butler and supposed to make sure I was having a good time, I wanted him to relax and hang out with me today. It took some convincing, and I even had to speak to his boss about what I wanted him to do before he agreed. His boss told him, "Whatever the client wants." But I understood Javier wasn't used to being pampered. I felt he deserved it, though, after all we had been through. "Who knew when I came on this vacation it would turn out like this?" I said. Colin was an investigative reporter who was investigating Maria Alvarez, and he was the one who called the cops. Mark, who I thought was one of Maria's thugs, was actually an undercover cop. He had figured out who Colin was a while back and had warned him not to interfere with his investigation. When he arrived at the house with Belinda and found us, he knew what was going to happen and had sent Colin a text to call the police and send them to the address. I still couldn't believe Belinda had her own sister killed. She hadn't told anyone who had done it, and so far, what little the police would tell me, they didn't have any leads. The person who murdered Bessie was in the wind. At least I knew Bessie was as sweet and genuine as I thought she was when we had dinner because she was just trying to help her sister stay out of jail. It's going to take a while to get back to my normal routine with the normal patrons we get, but I think it's going to be much harder for my aunt to recover from the fact of how wrong she was about Maria Alvarez, Javier said. Surely she can be happy that she was wrong about something she thought was so bad. I'm sure she will be eventually, but you don't know my aunt. She stakes her reputation on knowing everything that's happening, and she doesn't like to be wrong. In fact, I'm not sure she's ever been wrong. Belinda had somehow found out about Maria being a smuggler, probably through whatever underground criminal network there was in the world, and had reached out to her about growing the passport forgery business. Maria was willing to do business, but come to find out, Maria's smuggling was actually a good thing. Illegal, but a good thing. Once the police found out that she had been smuggling prescription medications and medical equipment to distribute to those who needed it, they were lenient on her. She was still going to do some time since it was illegal, but at least she wasn't smuggling humans the way the rumors said. Mark had been the one who left me the note, erased the footage, and tried to scare me at the cliffs. He knew what was going to happen if I got too close to Belinda's operations. He wanted to scare me off to protect me. I know what Maria was doing was wrong, but she was just trying to help people. I can't totally fault her for that, I said. Me either. And give my aunt time. She'll come around and have everyone convinced she knew what Maria was doing all along. I sighed in contentment. While this vacation had been nothing like I expected, it had still been a great one. Bessie's murder saddened me, but I was glad her sister faced justice. I had made new friends in Javier and Pete, and I had enjoyed this beautiful country. Life was pretty good. Tomorrow is your last day here. I think you should end on a bang, Javier said, breaking into my thoughts. What do you mean by that? There's another excursion going up to the cliffs. I laughed. I would rather chase down another killer than cliff dive. How about we just do another beach day? I felt I had already been adventurous enough on this trip. Soaking up the sun and hanging out with my new friend were all the excitement I needed. The end. This has been Burglary in Belize, a Readwine Bookstore cozy mystery. Book 8. Written and narrated by Lena Turner.